Chapter 2886. Immediately Ziming looked at Xiaohua, nodded slightly, turned around and left. Xiaohua and the others, under the guidance of the maid, found a quiet room in the palace. After the maid left, Xiaohua looked at the huge quiet room, and couldn't help but smile. Damn, I'm afraid this is the biggest quiet room I've ever seen in my life. Yes, this quiet room was actually 100 feet in size. The four walls were engraved with strange characters. Some were similar to the inscriptions on armor, some were similar to the green seal text, and some were even similar to the golden seal text. It looked neither fish nor fowl. Moreover, among these characters there were still many fist-sized patterns, and there were many stories and situations inside. Xiaohua leaned in front of a stone wall with interest. Just as he was about to take a closer look at the pattern, his heart suddenly moved. He looked around and hesitated for a moment. Without setting up any array, he sat down cross-legged and his mind entered the space. Everything in the space was normal. Since Goldie swallowed Qingxian's avatar, it had been sleeping. Obviously, this avatar was more nutritious than the previous golden core. Jiang Luer was also sitting at the edge of the space, showing no signs of waking up. Compared to Jiang Luer's silence, Xiaohua's human form primordial spirit was extremely noisy. This primordial spirit was in a barren place. Its hands were waving tirelessly, and a series of seals were cast at an extremely fast speed. These seals didn't have any ripples of magic power at all. Alas, this is not the way. Xiaohua looked at this primordial spirit, and his heart was quite distressed. Do I really have to let this primordial spirit cultivate? Besides, this primordial spirit has no meridians in its body. How can it cultivate? Thinking of this, Xiaohua's mind lit up again. Yes, don't I have meridians all over my body? Can I build meridians all over the body in this primordial spirit? This thought just flashed through his mind. What a big movement that was. Xiaohua didn't have any ability to do this at all. Besides, even if there are meridians, the spiritual energy in this space thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly laughed. Damn it, why am I so stupid? The spiritual energy in this space is released by reverse light. It's light, not the real spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Or maybe it's different from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the Dawn Rain continent. What's the use of the Dawn Rain continent's incantations? Firstly, I can't activate the magic power in my body. Secondly, I can't mobilize the spiritual energy in the air. Naturally, I can't create a fireball. But, how do I mobilize the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in this space? Xiaohua unconsciously sank into deep thought. The primordial spirit in the space also sat down cross-legged, just like Xiaohua in the quiet room in the main hall. After an unknown period of time, the hand of the primordial spirit suddenly moved. It seemed to be a move. Then the primordial spirit jumped up from the ground. Its hands and feet moved as well. The Big Dipper magical fist was actually in the hands of the primordial spirit. Waves of heaven and earth spirit chi danced along with the Big Dipper god fist, surging within the primordial spirit's hands. Then, it penetrated into the primordial spirit's hands, and a trace of brilliance began to surge. The primordial spirit didn't know how many times it had performed the Big Dipper magical fist. The brilliance between its hands became more and more brilliant. Then the primordial spirit stopped. Its hands inexplicably danced, and the brilliance immediately dimmed. When the brilliance disappeared, the primordial spirit once again danced with the Big Dipper magical fist, and the brilliance surged again. This cycle repeated several times. In the end, even if the primordial spirit didn't dance with the Big Dipper magical fist, the brilliance didn't fade or dim. Then, the primordial spirit sat down cross-legged again, and the fireball incantation in its hands was shot out again. However, this incantation was very slow. It seemed that the primordial spirit could control the brilliance, and it could change the incantation according to the intensity of the brilliance. Seeing that a trace of fire was about to be born from the brilliance, there was a movement outside the quiet room. Xiaohua's mind sensed the movement in the space. He sighed and came out of the space. He knew that the 3-day period was already up. When will this young master be able to cultivate in peace? This didn't seem to be the first time Xiaohua sighed with emotion. Thinking about it carefully, it was just as Xiaohua said. He really hadn't had a good closed-door cultivation several times. Thinking about other people, in order to improve their cultivation, they would go into closed-door cultivation for more than 10 years, dozens of years, or even hundreds of years. Xiaohua, on the other hand, had only gone into closed-door cultivation for 3 years at most. It was really a pity that he couldn't digest and absorb so many cultivation methods, spells, and comprehensions. After the war, this young master must go into closed-door cultivation. And then just as he got up, Xiaohua thought of this and smiled bitterly. After the war, I'm afraid I have to wake up Jiang Luer first, right? Opening the door of the hall, he saw Ziming standing outside. However, there was no smile on Ziming's face. Instead, there was a kind of anger. Oh, what's wrong? Xiaohua felt a little strange. He looked around and asked, where are Xiao Mao and the others? Aren't you going to use the Netherworld Mirror today? This young master has disappointed fellow Xiao. Ziming bit his lips and said in a low voice, today I still can't use the Netherworld Mirror. Oh, what's the matter? Xiaohua was not surprised. Could it be that the Netherworld Mirror can't be used? That's not it. Ziming shook his head. The Netherworld Mirror hasn't been used for a long time. It can be used 3 times. However, just now, after this young master took a bath and changed clothes, I was about to go to the Ancestral Hall to ask for the Netherworld Mirror. G-Man sent someone to inform this young master, saying that G-Man of the Jing Apple Village also came to ask for the Netherworld Mirror the day before yesterday. Moreover, she said that she wanted to use it twice. And because G-Man had promised this young master, but this young master told her about Xiao Mao, she thought that we could only use it once. Therefore, she had already promised G-Man of the Jing Apple Village to let them use the remaining 2 times. Oh, Xiaohua said with some regret. This is troublesome. Senior brother Li came to Ming Mountain to. Alas, yes. Ziming said with some regret. It's all this young master's fault. I should have made it clear to G-Man that day. But I didn't expect that the Netherworld Mirror that no one has used for so many years would suddenly become a popular item. Haha, as the saying goes, there's no story without coincidences. Xiaohua comforted him. Zai, why don't you make it clear to G-Man, and let the Jing Apple Village wait for the next time? Alas, this young master will naturally do as fellow Taoist Xiao said. Ziming sighed. This young master just came from the Huai Xian Pavilion. G-Man of the Jing Apple Village is also there. G-Man has already promised them, so it's not good to change her mind. What should we do? Xiaohua frowned. Although one of the purposes of Li Zongbao coming to Meng Mountain was to see Kai Zhuoxia's situation in the Netherworld, compared to Xiao Mao, this matter was slightly inferior. Xiao Mao definitely had to use the Netherworld Mirror. However, if Li Zongbao didn't use the Netherworld Mirror, the knot in his heart would never be untied. It would be of no benefit to his future cultivation. Moreover, his Dao heart was damaged, and he needed to use this to make up for it. Therefore, Li Zongbao also had to use the Netherworld Mirror. Can't the Jing Apple Village use it once? Xiaohua asked in a low voice. It would be best if the Jing Apple Village could use it once. Unfortunately, the Jing Apple Village's G-Man has a good relationship with G-Man, so she didn't say anything. Ziming said hatefully. Therefore, this young master got angry and simply didn't say anything. Furthermore, he wanted to use it 3 times in a row. At this time, it's not good to fall out with G-Man. Xiaohua looked around and whispered. Hee, Ziming smiled and said. G-Man was also in a difficult position. Later on, she thought of a way to let the Jing Apple Village's spirit warrior compete with us. Whoever wins will use it twice first, and give the remaining time to the other party. Ah, a competition. Xiaohua was stunned. Among the few of us, only Xiao Mao has the power of the bloodline of a great god. However, he's just an amateur and can't be taken seriously. How can he be compared to a spirit warrior? Could it be, Zai wants me to fight? Xiaohua seemed to understand the reason why Ziming looked for him alone. Hee. Fellow Taoist Xiao, with this young master here, how can we be at a disadvantage? Ziming smiled and said, the Jing Apple Village's spirit warrior is an expert who has cultivated to the Meridian Heaven realm. Even this young master, and the others are no match for him. How can Xiao Mao defeat him? Although fellow Taoist Xiao isn't afraid of those spirit warriors, how can this young master let fellow Taoist Xiao fight in Backearth village? Then Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Other than a competition, there are many other ways to determine the winner. Ziming said with a smile. Oh Zai, tell me about it. Xiaohua was interested. Actually, it's nothing much. Ziming explained. In the past few decades, the weather in Meng Mountain has changed greatly. The soul wood that I use for soul cultivation has become less and less. Even if I use the village's secret technique to cultivate it, it's still hard for it to grow. In another 10 days, the netherworld eye will open. G-Man said that whoever can get the soul wood from the netherworld eye first will be the winner. Soul wood? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. It's the spirit tea that this young master gave fellow Taoist Xiao last time. It's so fragrant. Ziming pursed his lips and said, that thing in Meng Mountain has a name called Daybreak Moon. It's used for cultivation. Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart was greatly relieved. He said with a smile, Zai, you're really extravagant. You actually use soul wood to make tea. How can poor people like us endure this? Fellow Taoist Xiao. Although Daybreak Moon can be used for cultivation, the Daybreak Moon can still be drunk as spirit tea, Ziming said with a smile. You don't think that this young master will drink it directly with Daybreak Moon, do you? Xiaohua laughed mischievously. He really did think so. However, what Ziming said was normal. After the Daybreak Moon was extracted with the soul thread, it still looked like a spirit tea. Xiaohua casually threw it away, but he didn't expect that the spirit tea that Ziming drank was this. Seeing Xiaohua's silly smile, Ziming curled his lips in annoyance. Xiaohua clapped his hands and took out some Daybreak Moon. He said with a smile, what a coincidence. Last time, Zai gave me some Daybreak Moon. Later, I came across some at the secret auction in Sky Patrol City, so I exchanged some spirit stones for it. I thought that after the war, I would return to Shi country to find Zai to enjoy it together. I didn't expect that it would come in handy today. With these Daybreak Moon, victory is in our hands. Chapter 2887. You actually have so many Dawnlight Moons? Seeing the Dawnlight Moon in Xiaohua's hand, Ziming was shocked and regretful at the same time. If I had known earlier, I should have gone to look for the Dawnlight Moon. What? What does Zai mean? Xiaohua was shocked when he saw Ziming's regretful expression. Alas! Ziming slapped his forehead and smiled bitterly. Fellow Taoist Xiao, there are many types of soul wood. This Dawnlight Moon is only one of them. There are also netherworld orchids, netherworld bamboo, and so on. I know that the Dawnlight Moon in the netherworld has already been found by my Huta village. How could it be easy to find? I vaguely remembered that there was a netherworld orchid somewhere, so I rushed to find it and pushed the problem of the Dawnlight Moon to the Jingapple village. If I had known that fellow Taoist Xiao had the Dawnlight Moon, I would have rushed to find it. Netherworld orchid? When Xiaohua heard this, he immediately thought of the netherworld lotus he saw in the netherworld land. That thing disappeared when it was stored in his space. Even if he wanted to take it out now, he couldn't. Fine. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. This is fate playing tricks on people. Since Sai knows where the netherworld orchid is, we can just go and get it. Yes, that's right. Ziming put away his regret and smiled. I also had the same idea. Although I can't tell the direction in the netherworld I have been there before. Moreover, I have a way to find that place. Although I don't have full confidence in winning with the Dawnlight Moon, I have a 70% chance of finding the netherworld orchid. Okay, I will tell Xiao Mao and the others. 10 days later, we will go to the netherworld eye. Xiaohua nodded and said without asking about the situation in the netherworld eye. However, Ziming pulled Xiaohua back and said with a bitter smile, Fellow Taoist Xiao, that's the netherworld eye. It's not a place that's easy to get along with. Even if I go in, it's still somewhat dangerous. How about you all don't go? How can that be done? When Xiaohua heard that Ziming wanted him to go in, he shook his head and said, Xiao Mao and the others don't have to go, but I must accompany you. Otherwise, it's fine if we don't use the Netherlink mirror. A smile appeared on Ziming's face as he shook his head and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, I knew you would definitely go. Then the two of us will head to the Nethereye. Young Master Xiao and the others don't have to go. With their cultivation, they might not be able to come out after going in. All right, we'll do as you say. Xiaohua nodded. In addition, Ziyi and Ziming. Perhaps after 10 days, there will be an end to this. Ziming muttered to himself for a moment, sighed, and said a few words to Xiaohua via sound transmission. And this Xiao understands. I will listen to Zai's instructions. Xiaohua heard Ziming's words and nodded slightly. Then I'll go back and make some preparations. I'll come look for fellow Taoist Xiao in 10 days. Seeing that Xiaohua agreed, Ziming smiled and left. After Xiaohua sent Ziming off, he immediately explained to Xiao Mao and the others. When Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao heard that there was a change in the situation, they were also surprised. When they heard that Xiaohua and Ziming were going to the Nethereye together, they knew that this was the best plan. No one said anything and only nodded at Xiaohua, telling him to be careful. Fairy Hongxia's reaction was similar to the two of them. However, she curled her lips and her gaze seemed to have some other meaning. Immediately after, the three of them cultivated in silence. Fairy Hongxia hurriedly comprehended the Phoenix Order. Xiao Mao familiarized himself with the power of his bloodline, and Li Zongbao similarly nurtured the immortal slaughtering whip. As for Xiaohua, of course, his mind entered the space again. At this time, his human primordial spirit could already release a simple fireball. Of course, whether it was the fireball technique or the fireball, it was very different from Xiaohua's own. Not to mention that the fireball technique had changed a lot. Even the fireball was several times bigger than the outside. It seems that the strength of this technique has a lot to do with the density of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Xiaohua looked at the fireball technique that was comparable to a talisman and curled his lips. In the next few days, Xiaohua let his human primordial spirit familiarize himself with how to use the fireball technique. In the last few days, since he could use the fireball technique, Xiaohua no longer let his primordial spirit try other techniques. Instead, he directly sent the three-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace and the samadhi true fire into the space, and let his human primordial spirit try to control the alchemy technique. He also took some spiritual herbs and let him try it. Feeling that it was almost time, Xiaohua's mind was about to leave the space again. However, the moment he left, his heart suddenly moved. He looked at the karma hand in the air and made a plan in his heart. When he left the space, he immediately waved his hand and took out the other jade pendant that Jiuxia gave him. This was also a jade pendant with a faint 5-colored brilliance. It was the same as the jade pendant that recorded the sun shrouding art. However, when Xiaohua immersed his unrestored divine sense into the jade pendant, he saw the 4 simple characters. Before he could carefully examine them, the 4 characters quickly swayed. The instant they swayed, 4 vortexes appeared from the 4 characters. A feeling of the world spinning came from Xiaohua's divine sense. His divine sense was immediately torn into 4 parts. Without any resistance, it was thrown towards the 4 vortexes. The divine sense that had never been restored was torn into 4 parts by these 4 vortexes. That pain was unbearable. This kind of unforeseen event was extremely fast. Xiaohua only had time to think of resisting. At this critical moment, Jiuxia's beautiful face appeared in front of Xiaohua's divine sense. The powerful suction force immediately disappeared. However, when the suction force disappeared, the 4 characters also disappeared behind Jiuxia's smiling face. Darling Xiao, Jiuxia said with a smile. You're being naughty again. Didn't this concubine say it before? This divination technique isn't something that can be easily seen. Divination has always been the most exhausting. Right now, your primordial spirit and divine sense haven't been strengthened, so you haven't reached the basic conditions to comprehend this divination technique. If you forcefully comprehend it, you'll definitely be exhausted and eventually turn into ashes. Fortunately, this concubine knew that you were very curious and would definitely secretly come to take a look. That's why this concubine stayed here to watch over you. It won't be too late for you to come here after you've mastered the sun shrouding art. When you can comprehend this controlling the heavens and earth, this concubine will be able to come and see you again. Following Jiuxia's smiling face, Xiaohua's divine sense was forcefully sent out of the jade pendant by Wuxia. See, Xiaohua's divine sense withdrew from the jade pendant. His back was covered in a layer of cold sweat. He felt that his divine sense was already very powerful, comparable to that of a nascent soul. However, in front of the divine sense that Wuxia left in the jade pendant, in front of the words of the divination technique recorded in the jade pendant, it really couldn't withstand a single blow. Wuxia, what is her cultivation level? Xiaohua was really glad. This mysterious Wuxia was now a friend and not an enemy. Just based on this divine sense, Xiaohua knew that he was definitely not her opponent. Controlling the heavens and earth? Thinking about the secret technique recorded in the jade pendant that Wuxia mentioned, Xiaohua muttered to himself, just by looking at this tyrannical name, I can tell how powerful this divination technique is. Although my karma hand has always been improving, there hasn't been any clear results. If it's combined with this controlling the heavens and earth, there will definitely be some unexpected results. But this secret technique is so mysterious and the requirement for divine sense is also so high. It seems that without 100 years of bitter cultivation, it's impossible to even see it. Perhaps Xiaohua was unwilling in his heart. He was holding the medicinal pill in his hand but couldn't eat it. It was really uncomfortable. Xiaohua blinked his eyes and thought about the karma hand he saw just now. Throwing it to that primordial spirit. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Even if there is a problem, isn't there still Wuxia's divine sense blocking it? Thinking about this, Xiaohua put the jade pendant into the space and his mind also entered it. He was a little nervous and a little expectant as he sent the jade pendant into the karma hand. At the same time, the primordial spirit that was swimming in the karma hand also jumped into the jade pendant. Oh, it really works. In Xiaohua's mind, bit by bit, information came from the primordial spirit. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Unfortunately, although Xiaohua's primordial spirit could comprehend the divination technique of controlling the heavens and earth, and according to the records in the jade pendant, this divination technique was different from the sun-shrouding art. The records were very detailed, and there wasn't anything missing. However, the controlling the heavens and earth secret technique was extremely obscure and difficult to comprehend. The difficulty level far exceeded all the techniques Xiaohua had seen before. If I can comprehend it simply, how can I control the heavens and earth and predict the future? Xiaohua smiled. Since I can comprehend it, then it's good. Thinking about this, Xiaohua came out from the space with a smile on his face and walked toward the door of the hall. This was because there was already some noise coming from outside the palace. Xiaohua opened the door and saw Ziyi, who was escorted by dozens of serving girls, walking towards him with a smile on her face. When she saw Xiaohua, she cupped her fist and said, "Fellow Daoist Xiao, I've heard from Ziming that you've traveled thousands of miles to Meng Mountains to visit me. I'm really flattered." Looking at Ziming, who had changed into men's clothing and looked exactly the same as when he was in Sky Patrol City, Xiaohua cupped his fists and smiled. When we parted at Sky Patrol City, this Xiaohua missed Ziyi very much. Who would have thought that I would meet Ziming again in Meng Mountains? Only then did I know that Ziyi was actually a soul warrior from Huta Stronghold. Ziyi, you really hid it from this Xiaohua. This little one also has some difficulties that I can't say. I've really wronged fellow Daoist Xiao. Ziyi stepped forward and took Xiaohua's hand. He smiled and said, "Moreover, this little one has been serving the sacred beast in the ancestral hall these days, and didn't have time to come and visit fellow Daoist. I hope fellow Daoist can forgive me." Previously, Xiaohua didn't know that Ziyi was Ziming, so he didn't feel anything when he held Ziyi's hand. Now that he knew Ziyi was Ziming, this soft little hand felt strange. "Let's go, fellow Daoist Xiao." Ziyi didn't care. He grabbed Xiaohua's hand and turned around to walk out of the hall. As he walked, he said with a smile, "This little one heard that Sister Ziming wanted to enter the Netherworld Eye with you. This little one can't delay any longer. This little one has entered the Netherworld Eye before, but Sister didn't. How can this little one let fellow Daoist and Sister take the risk?" Chapter 2888. Haha, then I'll have to trouble you, Ziyi. Xiaohua snickered in his heart as he accompanied Ziyi out of the hall. Fairy Hongxia and the others also came out of the seclusion room. Fairy Hongxia and the others naturally received Xiaohua's message and pretended to greet Ziyi. However, when she saw Ziyi holding Xiaohua's hand, Fairy Hongxia's gaze fell on their hands, and she unhappily curled her lips. Under Ziyi's lead and the escort of a group of servant girls, the group passed through dozens of palaces and dozens of plazas before finally arriving in front of a palace. This palace was built on the side of a mountain, and its style was different from the ones they saw before. The palace's color was mainly black, with occasional blood-red embellishments. Within the black, there were uneven lines that looked like bones and skeletons that covered the entire palace's outer walls. As for the palace's entrance, there were many beast heads. These beast heads were big and small, and each of them looked extremely ferocious. Even their facial features were different. Xiaohua looked on with admiration in his heart. He really couldn't imagine where the craftsman who built this palace got so many strange beast heads. At this time, there were many spirit warriors lined up on both sides of the palace. These spirit warriors were uniform in size and wore black armor. This armor was somewhat similar to the sword armor of a sword cultivator, but there were also some beast heads on it, and some strange bone patterns on it. It looked very mysterious. The spirit warriors lined up from the entrance of the palace for dozens of zhang until they reached the stairs and the large plazas. There were many palaces and plazas in the back earth stronghold. It seemed that there was a plazas in front of each palace, and the size of the plazas was related to the importance of the palace. Looking at the larger plazas, Xiaohua knew that this was a very important palace in the back earth stronghold. Looking at the plazas again, there were black banners all around. There were also some green patterns on the banners. The banners at the four corners of the plazas depicted 4 different types of soul beasts. Some had wings on their backs, some stood on clouds. The banners in the middle of these banners had some bone patterns and beast heads. Every banner swayed with the wind, and as they swayed, faint traces of black clouds appeared. On the contrary, the 4 huge banners at the 4 corners of the square were only slightly unfurled, and did not flutter. It looked very strange. Under each banner stood a tall and sturdy spirit warrior. These spirit warriors were different from the spirit warriors who stood at the entrance of the hall. Not only were they tall and sturdy, but their muscles were also sturdy. Each and every one of them stood proudly and looked straight ahead. There were a few people standing in the plaza beneath the banner. These people were dressed differently, and all of them were rather old. In front of these people, near the stairs, there was a square stone table about 3 meters in size. The stone table was the color of bamboo and faintly glowed with light. Lying on top of it was a soul beast that was about 3 meters in size. This soul beast was even weirder. Its slender body was like a giant thumb, and there was a 1-foot-long beast head on its body. This beast head looked like a dog's head, but its eyes were slender and its nose was huge. Its mouth was slightly open, and a faint red tongue was sticking out. Wisps of white gas were coming out of the beast's mouth. The soul beast had 4 legs. The front 2 were slightly longer, and were resting on the stone table. The back 2 were slightly shorter, and were separated by the edge of the stone table. A pitch-black tail was swinging from time to time. Oh, seeing the tail of the soul beast, Xiaohua's gaze followed the tail to the back of the soul beast. This pitch-black color led all the way to the back of the soul beast's head, as if there was a black sword on its back. The abdomen of the soul beast was pure white, without a single strand of mixed hair. Seeing Xiaohua's attention on the soul beast, Ziming whispered, "This soul beast is called Mingyu. It is a rare creature in Meng Mountains because it has a special soul. It seems to have been used as a sacrifice for the netherworld eye." Hearing this, Xiaohua's gaze swept across Mingyu's slightly squinted eyes. Those eyes were looking at the banners around the square. Some of them were scattered, and some of them were leisurely. It was as if he didn't know that he was at the end of his life. Sigh, a vague feeling arose in Xiaohua's heart. He seemed to be able to feel the confusion and playfulness in Mingyu's heart. The ignorant are fearless. Perhaps this is the case. Even at the end of one's life, being completely ignorant and not asking, perhaps this is a kind of happiness? As Ziming pulled Xiaohua's hand and entered the square, many people's gazes were attracted. These people's gazes swept past Ziming, and then landed on Xiaohua. Although Xiaohua wasn't wearing a Taoist robe, his different appearance and different temperament made it very easy for people to be surprised. Xiaohua had already tempered his soul consciousness, and he had already felt a few soul consciousnesses sweeping across his body. These soul consciousnesses were slightly different from Buddhist consciousness and divine will. It was easy to distinguish whether they were hostile or friendly. Xiaohua had already noticed that a few of them were hostile towards him. What is Ziyi doing? Xiaohua was a little confused. Isn't this guy prepared to disappear? Why would he want me to appear here with him? While he was thinking, 4 people walked out from the crowd. These 4 people had a respectful look on their faces. They smiled from afar and said, "Young Master Ziyi, this old one hasn't seen you for a long time. I didn't expect to disturb you from serving the sacred beast because of the trivial matters of my Jing Apple village. Damn it." When they got close, they actually had to bow down and pay their respects. Ziming had a smile on his face as he hurriedly helped them up. Looking at the dark-skinned but spirited old man, Ziming said, "Elder Jilan, Zai is just a junior. He definitely isn't worthy of such great courtesy from you. Moreover, when Ziyi was young, Ziyi received guidance from you. Even now Ziyi doesn't dare to forget it. Young master has a good memory." Elder Jilan's face lit up with excitement. His withered hands trembled in front of his chest. This old one has only told young master about soul consciousness a few times. Young master still remembers it. Haha, a teacher for a day is a teacher for life. Ziyi doesn't dare to forget the teachings of my ancestors. Ziming had a humble smile on his face. He looked up at the other 3 old men and said, "Elder Ziming, Elder Sunyu, and Elder Jingfan have also come. Greetings, young Master Ziyi." The other 3 old men didn't dare to neglect and shouted. This old one and the others didn't expect such a trivial matter in the village to disturb young master. Really? If the sacred beast blames the Jing Apple village for this old one and the others won't be able to atone for our sins. It doesn't matter, Ziming said with a smile. I heard from elder sister that everything is just gathering. Immediately after, Ziming pointed at Xiaohua beside him and said, "For elders, this is the Dao Sect's cultivator, Xiaohua, whom Ziyi met in Sky Patrol City back then. He and I hit it off at first sight, and almost became sworn brothers. However, he was in a hurry that day and was stopped by Fu Lu." Haha. Without waiting for Ziming to finish, Elder Lin Ming said with a smile, "Young Master Ziyi was born intelligent and has always had the style of the ancient people. In your eyes, there is no difference between the secular world. If young Master Ziyi is in charge of the Huda village, it will definitely be the fortune of our Ming Mountain." Hee, Ziming smiled and shook his head firmly. He looked at Xiaohua and said, "After Ziyi and fellow Taoist Xiao parted ways, I thought that it would be decades before we could meet again. However, I didn't expect that he would come to our Ming Mountain because of junior brother's matter, and even meet Ziming. This kind of fate. If it wasn't arranged by the Huta god, Ziyi wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Come. Fellow Taoist Xiao, greet these 4 sect elders. They are the sect elders of Jing Apple Stronghold, and they are also the pillars of Ming Mountains. As they have some important matters to attend to in the stronghold, they have no choice but to meet fellow Taoist Zhao's junior martial brothers. There is no grudge between us." Xiaohua suddenly understood and hurriedly bowed with a smile on his face. "I, Xiaohua, greet the 4 elders. We all want to ask for help from the Huta village. This is fate. Ha. Since fellow Taoist Xiao is Ziya's best friend and junior brother by his Ziming's acquaintance, what else can our Jing Apple village say? Miss Ziming has already given us a chance. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please don't take these trivial matters to heart. After all, we really don't have any grudges." How could Elder Jilan not know what Ziyi was thinking? He hurriedly returned the greeting and said with a smile. Since she had already explained everything, Ziming smiled again and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhao's junior brother has to use the Nether Passage mirror because of his own background. But what is so important about the Jing Apple village?" This Elder Jilan was a little hesitant. His face showed that he was in a difficult position. He smiled and said, "Ji-man didn't mention this to me. I also don't know the 2 juniors she brought with her. However, it seems like G-Man values them very much. Otherwise, the four of us wouldn't have accompanied G-Man. We are just afraid that these two juniors will be hurt. Oh, so it's like that. Ziming nodded. She had asked G-Man about it before, but G-Man only smiled and shook his head. He did not say anything. Clearly, he had already promised G-Man of the Jing Apple stronghold. At this moment, Elder Jilon also said that he did not know. Naturally, it was very secretive and also very important. Otherwise, G-Man of the Jing Apple stronghold would not risk offending Ziming and Ziyi by insisting on a chance to use the nether passage mirror. In the four corners of the plaza, under the pitch-black banners, 4 soul warriors raised their hands at the same time. A horn-like soul armament appeared in their hands and brought it to their mouths. Woo-woo-woo, a series of loud noises could be heard from the 4 corners of the plaza. In an instant, everyone shut their mouths and turned their eyes to the other side of the plaza. It was where the stairs were. Several strange canopy-like umbrellas appeared in mid-air. Then G-Man from Huta village, who was dressed like a palace, and an old woman who was about the same age as her, appeared under the canopy at the same time. G-Man from Huta village had a graceful face, and an unconcealable aura was emitted from her high hair bun. G-Man from Jing Apple village had an obvious look of fear on her face. Although G-Man from Huta village held her hand, she still moved back by half a body's length, and even her waist was slightly arched. Chapter 2889. Greetings, G-Man. When the bugle horn sounded, everyone shouted in unison. Most of the soul warriors prostrated themselves on the ground in reverence. Xiao Hua was a little stunned, but Xiao Mao, who was standing next to him, bowed elegantly. Although he had a respectful expression, he didn't seem to be panicking. Xiao Hua, Fairy Hongxia, and the rest looked at each other and followed Xiao Mao's example, bowing respectfully. Ziming naturally bowed. She originally wanted to pull Xiao Hua back, but when she saw Xiao Hua bow and smile, she didn't say anything else. It was as though Xiao Mao's etiquette conformed to the rules of Back Earth Stronghold. Everyone please rise. G-Man walked to the stairs, lowered his head and looked down. He waved his hand and said in a soft voice, his tone filled with dignity, "Thank you, G-Man." After everyone responded, they slowly stood up. Everyone, Ming Mountains is now facing a crisis that has never happened in the past million years. The weather is dry, and not a single grain is growing. The trillions of people in Ming Mountains are facing a life and death crisis. At this critical moment, the people of Ming Mountains, the descendants of the 12 great gods, must work together to overcome this crisis. Our unity is much more important than before. Unity is the foundation of an impregnable fortress. G-Man continued, no matter it is my Huta stronghold, Shibai stronghold, Jing Apple stronghold, Kungji stronghold, or even the tens of thousands of mega strongholds scattered all over Ming Mountains, we have to work together and get rid of all grudges and grudges. Only when we kneel down at the feet of the 12 great gods with a devout heart, and beg for the mercy of the 12 great gods, will we have a way to survive. We may be in charge of the shaman stronghold, or the power of souls, or even the bloodline of the 12 great gods, but we are just insignificant beings in this world, and cannot compare to the power of the 12 great gods. I believe that the 12 great gods will not forget us, and will not abandon their pitiful people. Besides, I also believe that the 12 great gods have heard our prayers, and have delivered the miracle that can solve the crisis in Ming Mountains. Today is the day that the netherworld eye of Huta village is opened. At this moment in this place, when we are about to confess to you, God Hutu, we should thank you and implore you to open the netherworld eye, open the eye of miracles and open our faith. Let us see the traces of the great God Hutu, let us see the Ming Mountains from the ancient age to the primordial age, and then from the primordial age to the present day. It is the great God's residence, and it is because of the great God's mercy that millions of my people can live in peace. As he spoke, G-Man also knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, begging the Huta great God to open her eyes. Seeing G-Man kneeling down, everyone panicked and hurriedly knelt down. Xiao Hua was a little surprised, and when he looked at Xiao Mao again, he saw that Xiao Mao's eyes were also filled with sincerity. Obviously, the 12 great gods that G-Man mentioned were the source of Xiao Mao's bloodline. Xiao Mao was no exception, and he also knelt down respectfully. Damn it. Xiao Hua was in a difficult position. He was a cultivator of the Taoist sect, and had nothing to do with the 12 great gods of soul cultivation. Even if the great gods wanted to protect them, they would protect the millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountains, and would not extend their hands to the Taoist sect. Why should he kneel down for no reason? But right at this moment, roar! A loud roar came from the front of the square. Xiao Hua looked up and saw that it was Mingyu, who was lying on the stone table. At this moment, Mingyu's body was twisting rapidly, and a roar came from his mouth. However, although there were no ripples of energy, and no soul sense, Mingyu's body could not break free from the stone table no matter how hard he struggled. On Mingyu's snow-white abdomen, strange runes appeared. These runes appeared slowly, stroke by stroke, as if someone dipped a brush in Mingyu's blood and drew them on his abdomen. See green seal script. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. This was the first time he saw green seal script being written stroke by stroke. And these green seal runes were blood red. Is this the work of Ji-Man from the Huta village? Xiao Hua's eyes were filled with shock, and he immediately looked at Ji-Man, who was kneeling on the ground. But Ji-Man was very respectful, and did not move an inch. Of course, Xiao Hua had cultivated in soul techniques as well. And he knew that soul techniques didn't require the Tao sect to form seals and control the spirit energy of the heavens and the earth. However, even though he didn't dare release his soul sense, he didn't sense the existence of any soul energy at all. At this moment, the first green seal rune was completed. Wu, a strange wind blew, and the green seal rune flew out from Mingyu's body. Under the green seal rune, there was another wave of blood light. Long, 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 long. Although it was not the sound of thunder, it was louder than thunder. The green seal rune formed by the bloodlight suddenly turned into blood-red threads and scattered in the air. Everyone, including Xiao Hua, felt their souls shake. This is the sound of the green seal rune. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. He looked at Mingyu again, and saw that his entire body was trembling violently, as if a large hand was violently strangling his huge body. Woo woo woo, after the thunderous roar, a huge gust of wind blew out from the green seal text. The wisps of blood also fused with the wind, and a gust of wind filled with a faint green light shot into the sky. Before the pillar of wind could disappear, pitch-black clouds gathered from all directions of the Huta stockade, and covered the entire sky. The art of clouds and rain. Xiao Hua's mind raced. But before he could look at the dark clouds, the second green seal rune appeared on Mingyu's snow-white abdomen, and a large amount of blood shot into the sky. Woo woo woo, this time, the sound was very muffled, as if it came from the mouth and nose of a giant. After this sound, countless hurricanes rushed into the sky, and whistled in all directions. Looking at the changes in the sky, Xiao Hua slightly narrowed his eyes, as if he was thinking of something. If there was a third green seal character, perhaps there should be lightning and thunder, perhaps there should be rain falling, right? Unfortunately, in just a moment, the third green seal rune shot into the sky, and a dazzling green light flashed, and a huge light ball covered the entire stone table. The poor Mingyu had no strength to struggle. Now in the light ball he only moved a little, and a shadow visible to the naked eye flew out from his body. Crack crack crack, a small green lightning bolt came out from the light ball, and hit the panicked soul of Mingyu. Then a small crack appeared in the middle of the light ball. GG. After a small chirp, a black shadow flashed out from the crack. The black shadow was like a big mouth, rushing towards Mingyu's soul, and swallowing it in an instant. Then, the black shadow suddenly expanded, and a strange human figure with a human body and a snake tail was revealed. And this human figure had 7 arms on its back. Hiss, Xiao Hua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was truly a bit unimaginable. Greetings, Huta great god. A loud voice came from all around the square. It was the worship of all the people of Meng Mountain. What should we do? Xiao Hua didn't know what to do. However, before he could think of anything else, an extremely cold and emotionless fluctuation swept through the entire plaza. An extremely powerful deterrence spread out from the black shadow to the entire plaza. Xiao Hua, Li Zongbao, and Fairy Hong Xiao were bowing slightly, but now they couldn't resist at all. Plop, plop, plop. Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia fell to the ground, their faces pale. Obviously, they couldn't resist this indescribable deterrence. As for Xiaohua, he also felt like a huge mountain was pressing down on his shoulder, and that unparalleled force pushed him to the ground. But the moment he knelt on the ground in the Buddha fire of the Buddha Saraira, the faint, almost inaudible golden thread slowly emitted a gentle wave. Although the wave was small, it was like the grass under the cliff, tenacious and persistent. A faint force of support came from Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua gritted his teeth and used all his strength to push one knee to the ground, and the other leg trembled, but didn't fall. Xiaohua raised his head slightly, staring at the black shadow, and persisted. Woo-woo, the shadow of Huta Great God in the black shadow suddenly moved, but it didn't rush toward Xiaohua. That unparalleled deterrence, and the wave retreated from the square like a tide, rushing toward the door behind the stone table. Boom! The beast heads above the door opened up, and under the impact of the wave, a 10-feet wide whirlpool was formed. After the black shadow and the green ball of light rushed into the whirlpool, they immediately disappeared, and the whirlpool also slowly disappeared. Then, a ray of sunlight fell from the sky, and the dark clouds gradually dissipated. The raging wind in the sky also disappeared. Farewell, Huta Great God. Another respectful voice sounded. After half a cup of tea's time, G-Man of Huta's stronghold stood up from the ground. After she stood up, the first thing she looked at was Xiaohua. At this moment, Xiaohua didn't have the time to pay attention to this. He frowned slightly as he looked at the still closed door, because when everyone was kneeling on the ground, he clearly saw that right after the shadow of Huta Great God appeared, the crack in the sky disappeared, and then the shadow directly rushed toward the door. Everyone, G-Man glanced at Xiaohua, then looked at Ziming who just stood up, and an indescribable expression appeared in her eyes. Then she turned to the square and waved her hand. The netherworld eye has been opened. Huta Great God might not come to Huta's stronghold to hear our sincere prayers, but her clone has already come. She hasn't forgotten about us. Opening the netherworld eye is the same as opening the source of the inheritance of the Huta Great God. As he spoke, G-Man waved his hand, and a palm-sized bone staff appeared in his hand. A strand of light green radiance flashed, and it struck the tightly shut door. Bang! The two doors above the door vanished abruptly, and it revealed a pitch-black expanse behind it. Chapter 2890. Oh, it's not the usual hall? Xiaohua's eyes never left the hall door. The moment the door disappeared, he could see everything behind the darkness. There was a huge passage behind the door, and a cold wind was blowing out from it. This cold wind was different from the usual night wind. When it blew onto Xiaohua's body, an indescribable chill was born from Xiaohua's heart. It was as if the cold wind could blow through his body. The netherworld wind? Xiaohua felt the familiar cold wind and frowned. There seems to be a difference. Woo woo woo, as the cold wind blew, all of the motionless banners on the square immediately began to flutter. Even the banners at the four corners of the square began to move. It was as if only the cold wind could make all the banners move. All the soul warriors raised the bugle horn in their hands at the same time and blew it. The sound of the bugle horn immediately echoed throughout the plaza, and even spread out to the entire Huta stronghold. Roar roar roar, a burst of cheers came from the plaza, causing Xiaohua to look away from the passage. When he saw the situation in the plaza, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Everyone in the plaza, regardless of gender, was dancing with the cold wind and the bugle horn. Their postures were exactly the same as what he saw in the Bai and stronghold. Around Xiaohua, even Ziming had a smile on his face as he jumped up and down happily. Fairy Hongxia's face was still pale. She sneaked to Xiaohua's side and whispered, "Just now, the Huta God's avatar was really powerful. This netherworld I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. You must be careful." And Xiaohua nodded. He knew that Fairy Hongxia didn't want him to go, but because of Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao, he had to go. This was why she was so eager to warn him. The plaza was filled with cheers and laughter. Only Li Zongbao, Xiaohua, and Fairy Hongxia seemed to be out of place. However, everyone's face was filled with sweet smiles. It seemed that with the protection of the Huta God, All the difficulties in front of them were just passing clouds. The celebration went on for the time it took to finish a meal, and only then did the crowd slowly come to a stop. G-Man from Huta Stockade came before the door, glanced around and said, "Most of the soulwood and soul beasts in Meng Mountains are taken from the netherworldly eyes, and according to the Magus Codex of Huta Stockade, even the millet seeds are produced from the netherworldly eyes. But for many years, we've been focusing on the soulwood and soul beasts. We've never paid attention to millet seed. Now that Meng Mountains is facing a great calamity, it is the great deity Hutu who is admonishing us, telling us not to forget our roots, and not to treat the words of the great deity Hutu as a passing wind. Therefore, when the netherworld eye opened this time, in addition to looking for ordinary soulwood, many warriors also wanted to look for millet seeds. May the great deity Hutu help you. Warriors of Huta's stronghold, the heavy burden of saving Meng Mountains has fallen on your shoulders. Woo woo woo, the horn sounded again. The millet seed is in the netherworld eye? Xiao Hua's eyes turned and whispered to Ziming. Also, aren't we the only ones entering the netherworld eye? Unexpectedly, Ziming frowned as well. He pondered for a while then said, I don't know the origin of millet seed. And according to what I know, the origin of millet seed has never been recorded in the Magus Code. Today G-Man sent soul warriors to the netherworld eye to look for the millet seed. As for whether there are others entering the netherworld eye, it doesn't matter to us. There are even benefits. And Xiaohua nodded. All right. After the sound of the bugle horn faded, G-Man waved her hand and said, however, before the brave warriors enter the netherworld's eye, this old one has an interesting matter that I would like to explain to you. After that, G-Man from Jingapple Village told them about how he had requested to use the Netherlink mirror from Huta Village, as well as how Xiao Mao and the others had requested to use the Netherlink mirror at the same time. In the end he said, young Mistress Ziming's old friend and young Master Zai's best friend are all here. Regardless of their identity, they are all Taoist cultivators of Meng Mountains. If it wasn't for the fact that this old woman had some difficulties, she definitely wouldn't have made things difficult for G-Man, young Lady Ziming, and young Master Ziyi. Thus, under G-Man's suggestion, we all sent people to the netherworld eye. If my Jingqiang village returns with the twilight moon seed first, then this old woman has the authority to use the netherworld mirror twice. If young Master Xiao and the others from the Dao sect obtain the netherworld orchid seed first, then this old woman can only use the netherworld mirror once. This old woman will say this in front of G-Man and all of you. I hope that all of you can bear witness to this. The people of Meng Mountains are definitely not people who bully distant guests. Oh, hearing this, many soul warriors finally understood the reason why Xiao Hua and the other Taoist cultivators had appeared here. Of course, some kind and vicious gazes and soul senses swept over again. Everyone. Seeing this, Ziming took a step forward and held Xiaohua's hand. She said, Xiaohua, young Master Xiao is Zai's best friend. Furthermore, they are all Taoist cultivators and are not aware of the dangers within the netherworld eye. If they were to enter alone, they would definitely not be able to escape unscathed. This kind of situation should not happen to the hospitable people of Meng Mountains like us. Thus, Zai is willing to accompany young Master Xiao into the netherworld eye. Of course, when choosing the Twilight Moon and the Netherworld Orchid, Zai chose the Netherworld Orchid, which is rarely seen in the Netherworld eye. To my Huta village, the Jingapple village is also an important guest. Zai does not dare to treat them poorly. Everyone was a little surprised. However, they soon came to a realization. Some admired Zai's loyalty, and some knew the reason why G-Man from Huta village sent out so many soul warriors. Either way, it's an interesting matter. Huta village's G-Man saw that the matter was clear. He laughed and said, if my Huta village's netherworld mirror could be used 4 times, then this situation would not have happened. This is also the reason why the great god Hutu wants us to enter the netherworld eye. I believe that all of the brave warriors here will return with a full load. Woo woo, all of the bugles sounded again. Roar roar, some of the soul warriors also let out sounds. Clearly, it was time to enter the netherworld eye. Young Master Xiao, let us enter first. Ziming held Xiao Hua's hand, and did not let go as he said with a smile, "All right, Zai, please." Xiaohua turned to look at Fairy Hongxia. At this moment, Fairy Hongxia's eyes were not on Ziming's hand. Instead, she was looking at Xiaohua worriedly. When she saw Xiaohua nodding at her, she smiled as well. However, her heart was already in her throat. If she was only slightly worried a few days ago, now that she saw how powerful the great god Huta's soul clone was, she was very worried about Xiaohua entering the Netherworld Eye. It was as if she had a premonition that this trip would not be simple. Zai and Xiaohua walked up the stairs hand in hand. The two of them bowed to Ji-Man. Ji-Man looked at Xiaohua from head to toe a few times before looking at Ziming. His eyes were filled with warmth. Zai, although the Netherworld Eye is not very dangerous, that was decades ago. Now that Ming Mountains has changed, the Netherworld Eye might have changed as well. You must be careful in there. Ji-Man said gently. If you can't get the Netherworld Orchid, don't force it. The Netherworld Mirror can only be used once. If the second time is not urgent, it won't be too late to use it after 10 years. Yes, the boy understands. When Ziming heard this, he seemed to be a little sad. He knew that from now on, Zai would not be able to appear in front of everyone. With tears in his eyes, he bowed and said, "Thank you, Ji-Man." Then he clenched his teeth and held back his tears. He pulled Xiaohua and quickly walked into the hall. Looking at the disappearing figures of Xiaohua and Ziming, Ji-Man's eyes were indifferent. There was nothing special about it. Then the two elders of Jing Apple Village, Ji Lan and Lin Ming, also entered. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the spirit warriors who were waiting in the square lined up and entered the dark passage. Fairy Hongxia and the others followed Ziming to the square at dawn. It was already late in the morning, and with the passing of time, the sun slowly hung above their heads. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the sun was scorching hot. But everyone's eyes were looking at the silent hall door and the dark passage. They didn't seem to feel the scorching heat of the sun. Unfortunately, their eager gazes were not the hands of the Huta great god. They couldn't pull the people they were waiting for out of the Netherworld Eye. Even when the sky was no longer scorching hot, and the evening mist was everywhere, no one appeared in the passage. Because of this, even Ji-Man of Huta village, who had always been indifferent, showed a hint of anxiety in his eyes. At this moment, everyone knew that this trip to the Netherworld Eye, something might have happened. The other spirit warriors didn't dare to say anything, but the elders were whispering to each other. After all, the Netherworld Eye opened at dawn and closed at midnight. Under normal circumstances, a spirit warrior should have appeared as early as noon. Fairy Hongxia had an extremely bad premonition in her heart. She seemed to recall the time when she was cultivating alone in the Valley of Ice. Xiaohua had appeared with extreme surprise. According to Xiaohua, he had been blown to the Valley of Ice by the wind of the Netherworld when he was cultivating in the Netherworld. How far was the Valley of Ice from Mingxi? Xiaohua was actually blown to her side. What about the Netherworld Eye? It was probably several times more powerful than Mingxi, right? As long as my darling Xiao is alive, it's fine. No matter where he goes. Fairy Hongxia prayed in her heart. As long as he's alive, I'll have hope. I'll definitely be able to accompany him in this world. I don't ask for anything like everlasting. I only ask for him to be in my heart, and me to be in his heart. Time flew by quickly, and the moonlight had already scattered down. Everyone was anxious and uneasy. At this moment, within the passageway, the entire palace, and the entire square, there was an abnormally loud sound. The ground shook violently, and strange changes suddenly occurred. Chapter 2891. Xiaohua followed Ziming into the palace. Inside the pitch-black passage, a strange cold wind blew. This cold wind was extremely bone-piercing, and there was even a thick smell of blood. Xiaohua was extremely familiar with this smell. It was the netherworld wind that he encountered in the netherworld. Looks like this netherworld is really big. Xiaohua very naturally began to guess what the netherworld was, and estimated what he might encounter in a while. Suddenly, Xiaohua felt a slight sweet fragrance pounce into his mouth and nose. His left arm also touched a soft and warm body. Even the soft hand that had been holding his hand suddenly became hot, and within the heat, there was a trace of moisture. That sweet fragrance was very strange. Not only was it not blown away by the wind of the netherworld, it was even denser. When Xiaohua breathed it in, he actually felt an extremely comfortable feeling in his heart. His hand could not help but clench that hand tightly. That hand seemed to feel Xiaohua's strength, and at the same time, increased its strength, and even intertwined its 5 fingers, clenching Xiaohua's hand tightly. The moment the 5 fingers intertwined, Xiaohua hesitated. Looking at the pitch-black surroundings, he sighed in his heart. It was said that the dark night could make a person brave. And it was indeed so. Although Ziming did not have any chance to express the feelings in his heart, once there was a chance for the feelings to ferment, he immediately became uncontrollable like a wild horse. In the instant Xiaohua hesitated, Ziming successfully grasped Xiaohua's hand, and even grabbed it twice, making it even more comfortable. Then that warm body snuggled closer. Cough cough, Xiaohua coughed twice and whispered. Ziyi hearing the name Ziyi. That warm body immediately stiffened, and slightly moved away from Xiaohua. However, that hand was still holding on, and did not relax in the slightest. Young Master Xiao, Ziming's voice recovered, and said somewhat timidly, "This concubine, Sai, this concubine is a woman and not Ziyi. If it was someone else, this concubine was purely trying to cover it up, but this concubine could not deceive herself when facing young master." But Xiaohua hesitated, as if he was afraid of hurting Ziming, and said in a low voice, "Ever since this Xiao saw you, I have always thought of you as Ziyi. In fact, when he saw you earlier, he even thought that you were Ziming and had a lot of hostility towards you." Hee, Ziming chuckled and clenched her fists even tighter. That's because this concubine's disguise was too good. Even young master didn't notice. Xiaohua tried to pull his hand away, but it didn't move. Instead, it made Ziming grip his hand even tighter. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Actually, Ziming sighed and said, "Actually, for so many years, it's been hard for me to disguise myself as Midnight. Although I can't bear to part with Midnight, I really want to revive him and let him be the real Midnight in my Huta stronghold. However, I never thought that this path would be so difficult. In front of others, this concubine has to act out the two of us perfectly." In the beginning, this concubine was really scared and treading on thin ice, afraid that others would see through any flaws. In this concubine's heart, it's also hard. Not only is it hard to change my identity, but it's also hard to bear this burden in my heart. Just like what this concubine said earlier, this concubine's only wish in this life is to revive Midnight. This is also the biggest motivation for this concubine to repair the soul-falling lamp and seize the position of G-Man. This burden has been crushing this concubine's heart for so many years. This concubine doesn't dare to think too much, for fear of disturbing the guilt this concubine feels towards Midnight. Do you know? Perhaps this concubine didn't feel it in Sky Patrol City. Even when I returned to Meng Mountains, this concubine didn't think too much. However, when I saw young Master Xiao in that barren mountain, this concubine really doesn't know how to express the joy this concubine felt. Ziming's voice was still secretly pouring out. But in just a moment, this concubine realized that you belong to Midnight and not Ziming. Even if Ziming is real and Midnight is fake, how could Ziming not know young Master Zhao's hostility towards Ziming? Even if Fairy Hongxia is dissatisfied with this concubine has long felt it. However, young Master Xiao is Midnight's only confidant, and this concubine's only confidant. This concubine is willing to suffer for young Master's sake. Just over 10 days ago, when this concubine decided to end Midnight's story, this concubine suddenly felt a sense of relief. Ziming's hand was a little warm. All of a sudden, I felt like my life was full of sunshine again, and everything that belonged to me was back in my hands. Then Xiaohua's hand stopped moving. He could really feel the tenacity and pain in this woman's heart, the feeling of carrying an unspeakable burden. "Aren't you going to resurrect Midnight?" "Young Master," this concubine has said before, this is this concubine's lifelong pursuit. Midnight died because of this concubine. This concubine will not give up any chance to resurrect Midnight in this lifetime. Ziming did not hesitate and continued. However, using the soul-setting lamp to resurrect the dead is after all just a legend. Even Elder Wu doesn't know how to do it. Unless this concubine's cultivation base reaches the ninth heaven of spirit origin, or even the legendary 3 heavens beyond the heavens. Or if I can learn the 365 heaven-piercing green seal scripts that have been lost in Meng Mountains for a long time, then there is a slight possibility. 3 heavens beyond the heavens? 365 green seal scripts. Xiaohua couldn't help but mutter a few times in the dark. Ziming seemed to have heard him and said again, "Unfortunately, these are all legends. Even if this concubine can cultivate the ordinary 9th heaven of spirit origin, and her soul can soar through the 9 heavens, this concubine can never reach the 3 heavens beyond the heavens, and stand shoulder to shoulder with the ancient Almighty. Or perhaps, this concubine is willing to learn all 365 green seal scripts, and use my life in exchange for Midnight's resurrection." Xiaohua originally wanted to ask more, but after hearing Ziming's sad and tearful narration, how could he still have such thoughts? His hand tightened a little, and he said with a smile, "No matter what Ziming does, this Xiao will do his best to help. This Xiao believes that as long as Ziming has the heavens in your heart, even the 3 heavens beyond the heavens can be broken through." You called me Ziming?" Ziming's voice was actually stuttering, as if she was wild with joy. "Silly child. You are Ziming, and you don't want to deceive yourself anymore. Why would this Xiao repeat the same mistake?" Xiaohua said with a smile, as if Ziming was an ignorant child. Xiaolang. Ziming leaned her body closer to Xiaohua, and Xiaohua could feel Ziming's burning hot face on his arm. "Sigh, this tunnel is indeed pitch black. But aren't we still deceiving ourselves now?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly, and was about to say something. But Ziming had already spoken first. "Xiaolang, this concubine knows that I am an uncivilized girl from Meng Mountain, and I don't deserve to call you Xiaolang. But please allow this concubine to be presumptuous for once, and I will only call you young Master Xiaolang in this netherworld. After leaving this place, this concubine will never." Xiaohua quickly stretched out his hand, and his right index finger accurately pressed on Ziming's cherry lips, and said with a smile, "There are some words that can't be said." Although Xiaohua didn't lower his head to look at Ziming, but when he suddenly felt a warm and wet sensation on his finger, he was so scared that he immediately retracted his finger. Ziming laughed. "This concubine has never been so happy in her entire life." Xiaohua laughed. "Walking in the snow in Sky Patrol City is also not bad." That's right," Ziming said happily. Because of Zai's matter, Ziming has always regarded herself as a man. But I didn't expect to meet such a strange person like Xiaolang in Sky Patrol City. To be honest, this concubine still doesn't understand. Is there really love at first sight in this world? When this concubine thought about how bold we were that day, and how this concubine gave you the soul-falling lamp without the slightest hint of disappointment, this concubine felt extremely strange. This Xiaohua immediately thought of Jiuxia, and was a little tongue-tied. This should be called familiarity at first sight, and not love at first sight. What do you think? This concubine feels that, whether it is love at first sight or familiarity at first sight, it is love at first sight. Ziming laughed. "Isn't this concubine in you?" This Xiaohua liked this kind of ambiguity in his heart, but he still didn't want to hide it from her, and wanted to speak again. But Ziming promptly interrupted him and laughed. "Xiaolang, this concubine will be G-Man of Huta village in the future. My future children will definitely be G-Man and Wu Lao, and Fu Man must spend her life in Huta village. This concubine has already decided. This concubine will only aim to revive Zai. And when the time is ripe, this concubine will give the position of G-Man to someone else." Ahem, Xiaohua smiled bitterly, coughed twice, raised his right hand and whispered, "This should be the end of this passage in front, right?" "Oh, is it?" Ziming hesitated, and when she looked up, she couldn't help but smile bitterly. "This concubine remembers that this passage is very long, but I didn't expect today, after walking for a while. We have already reached the end. This happiness, is it also like this? Is the time of joy always short?" "The end is also the starting point," Xiaohua said, trying to pull his finger out, but Ziming held it tightly, as if a woman had just opened her heart, and didn't allow him to leave at all. Outside the netherworld path is the Yellow Springs Great Hall, Ziming said with a smile. Above the Yellow Springs Great Hall, there is a soul formation that my Huta village has kept for hundreds of thousands of years, and the netherworld eye is under the soul formation. Alright, this Xiao will follow Ziming. Wherever Ziming goes, this Xiao will go. Xiao Hua said casually, but after he finished speaking, he realized that his words had a double meaning. Alas, with Xiao Lang, even the netherworld eye is a place of happiness. Ziming sighed slightly. Ziming would rather stay in the netherworld eye with Xiao Lang. Don't, Xiao Hua hurriedly said. Ziming has Ziming's responsibility. This Xiao also has this Xiao's mission. This idea of staying in the netherworld eye, please, don't think about it. Chapter 2892. Hahaha, darling, Xiao is really interesting. Hearing Xiao Hua say please, Ziming immediately laughed. Clearly, no one had ever told her this before. Poor child. Xiao Hua sighed. He knew that Ziming's identity was here, and she had always appeared as Midnight. She really lacked love and care. She felt that his normal words were very good. So it was clear that no one would normally speak to her. Immediately, Xiao Hua didn't say anything else. Ziming leaned against Xiao Hua's left arm, and walked out of the pitch-black, netherworld path with a smile on her face. At the end of the netherworld path, light shone brightly. It was an extremely strange space. This so-called Yellow Springs Great Hall was like an oval-shaped chicken egg, covering the entire space. On the four walls of the Great Hall, there were many revolving diagrams. These diagrams were similar to the banners outside the Great Hall. Each and every one of them was a beast head that couldn't be seen normally. However, behind these beast heads, there were different carvings. These carvings were big and small. The big ones were close to 10 zhang long, and the small ones were only a foot long. These beast heads were surrounded by many wave-like lines, which seemed to be similar to ordinary flowing water. However, if one looked carefully, each of these wave-like lines were formed by white bones. However, these white bones could now be bent just like water ripples. However, this couldn't attract Xiao Hua's attention. As soon as Xiao Hua stepped out of the netherworld path, his gaze fell on the ground of the Great Hall, because this Great Hall was covered in skeletons. Layers upon layers of snow-white skeletons, each with a pitch-black mouth and a pitch-black hole, were scattered on the ground like pieces of gravel. It was unknown where the light in the Great Hall came from, but when it shone on these skeletons, it was reflected back. A layer of indescribable light appeared on the ground of the Great Hall, as if the Great Hall was a layer of the Yellow Springs. The Yellow Springs Great Hall really lives up to its name. Xiao Hua sighed. He didn't even release his soul sense. In front of a soul warrior like Ziming, Xiao Hua's soul cultivation was no more than that of a child. And indeed, because of the light, Ziming was already embarrassed to snuggle between Xiao Hua's arms, but he was still unwilling to pull his hand out. After hearing Xiao Hua's words, he looked at Xiao Hua's face and said with a smile. Under the light, Xiao Hua's sword-like eyebrows were pitch-black, and his phoenix-like eyes were also faintly sparkling. His thin lips were closed together, and the corners of his mouth carried a trace of a smile. Sai Ziming looked like she was smiling like a flower, but she sighed in her heart. Since we are not fated, why should we know each other? Fate could not surpass this. Oh, seeing Ziming staring at him, Xiao Hua turned to look at Ziming's face and asked curiously, "Is there any other explanation for this Yellow Springs Hall?" Oh, Ziming's face blushed as she smiled. The Yellow Springs Road is meant for undead to walk. The purpose of building the Yellow Spring Palace here is to block off the Yellow Spring Road, to prevent those dead souls and nether beasts from rushing into Meng Mountains when the netherworld eye is opened. Nether beasts? Xiao Hua pointed his finger and said, "These should all be." Yes, Ziming nodded. The Yellow Springs Road, the netherworld sea, there are countless nether beasts inside, and these are only the ones that can be seen normally. Ziming, you say, is there really a netherworld in this world? Oh, or is this netherworld really the world of undead? Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment and finally asked. This Ziming did not expect Xiao Hua to ask this. After thinking for a moment, she explained, "Actually, according to the records of my Meng Mountain shaman canon, The Huta great deity transformed into the netherworld and became an independent reincarnation, which is not connected to any other world. Only the dead souls can enter through a way that no one knows. As for this netherworld sea, the Yellow Springs Road, and so on, they seem to be places where malicious spirits, vengeful spirits, and other existences that are different from us humans live. Moreover, if the netherworld is really the world of undead, Ziyi would have been resurrected long ago. Can I worry about it for the rest of my life? Seeing that Xiaohua wanted to ask something again, Ziming smiled and said, Xiaohua, there are a lot of secrets in my Meng Mountains, and even the Wheel of Heavenly Tao. If you are interested, you might as well come to my Huta stockade. In the future, the stockade's accumulation will definitely satisfy your curiosity. Hee, Xiaohua smiled and did not answer. He continued to ask, in other words, a soul warrior like Ziming who can control malicious spirits also does not know the difference between the Netherworld Sea and the Netherworld Sea? It's not just me. Ziming pursed her lips and said. Even the Grand Shaman, and even the Shaman King of Meng Mountains, I'm afraid they don't know. Shaman King Xiaohua smiled bitterly. After hearing about the Grand Shaman and Ji-Man, he once again heard the title of Shaman King. Let's go. Xiaohua, we are going in. Ziming naturally turned her head and took a glance. She patted her hand and took out the bone staff from the soul nest. She pulled her hand out of Xiaohua's hand, looked at Xiaohua with a smile, and began to chant. Following Ziming's witchcraft incantation, the bone staff began to emit a dark green brilliance. This brilliance became more and more dazzling in the Yellow Spring Palace. However, as time passed, the bone staff became heavy again. Moreover, a trace of dark red appeared on Ziming's face, as if it was quite strenuous. Go! Just when Xiaohua was a little worried, Ziming pointed the bone staff in her hand. The dark green brilliance rushed out of the bone staff and landed on a layer of skeletons. Swoosh! Like a great wave washing away sand. The green color dyed the white color, and the yellow spring instantly disappeared. At the same time, an oval burning with green flames suddenly appeared in the green color. Immediately after, the oval strangely stood upright, and actually became a fire circle like a moon gate. Xiaohua, Ziming's face was clearly pale. She stretched out her hand to grab Xiaohua's hand, and said with a forced smile, The Yellow Spring Gate has already opened. Are you willing to accompany this concubine to the 9 underworlds? Xiaohua originally wanted to withdraw his hand, but looking at Ziming's slightly pale face, this face could not be compared to Fairy Hongxia, and even more so, it could not be compared to Jiuxia. However, the eyes on this face were extremely hot, and did not lose out to anyone in the slightest. Forget it, it's just this trip anyway. Xiaohua's hand paused for a moment, but in the end he did not avoid it. Ziming held Xiaohua's hand, and the corner of her mouth revealed a sweet smile. Xiaohua could clearly see that there was actually an extremely deep dimple on Ziming's right cheek, and her smile was very sweet. Holding Xiaohua's hand, Ziming stretched out her left hand, and pushed it forward. The fire circle suddenly rushed out a strong gust of netherworld wind, blowing towards the two of them. In an instant, Ziming's long hair was blown up, and a few strands of black hair also landed on Xiaohua's face. Whoosh! In just a moment, a dark green light barrier appeared in Ziming's hand, blocking all of the netherworld wind. Then, Ziming took a step forward, and walked towards the Yellow Spring door. A strange scene appeared. As Ziming and Xiaohua held hands and disappeared from the fire circle that was as flat as a piece of paper, the fire circle suddenly exploded, and all of the jade flames scattered in all directions, igniting the entire Yellow Spring Hall. When the two elders of the Jing Apple Village arrived, they looked at the jade flames all over the ground, and a helpless smile appeared on their faces. Xiaohua followed Ziming into the Yellow Spring door, and he only felt a flash of brilliance in front of his eyes. He did not feel any pressure of being teleported, and his entire surroundings were filled with a layer of dark green. Xiaohua, close your eyes for a moment, Ziming said considerately. The netherworld I hear is blocked by the green seal text talisman, and the brilliance of the green seal text can easily cause the naked eye to be unable to adapt. Moreover, it's best for cultivators not to release their divine sense, or it will be corroded by the netherworld wind. Okay. Xiaohua obediently closed his eyes, and after a moment he opened them. Sure enough, when he opened his eyes again, the green brilliance was no longer glaring. Seeing Xiaohua being so obedient, Ziming suddenly felt a kind of warmth in his heart. These 6 are all the netherworld eye? Xiaohua looked around and saw that he was standing on a stone step, and below the stone step, in a huge space, there were 6 circular deep holes that were enveloped by a dark green brilliance. These deep holes were arranged neatly, with 2 in a group and 3 in a triangular shape. The entire space was filled with the netherworld wind, and the dark green brilliance in the deep holes was like an eye that was being blown up. Above the eye, a brilliance overflowed, and it was indeed similar to a real eye. As expected of the name Netherworld Eye, Xiaohua saw this and could not help but praise. Hehe, Xiaohua, this is nothing, Ziming said with a smile. If you see the existence inside the Netherworld Eye, you will definitely be flabbergasted, and your eyeballs will fall out. Oh, really? Xiaohua was surprised. I don't really believe it. Hehe, just you wait. Ziming clapped his hand and took out a shuttle-shaped soul tool from the soul nest. He chanted another incantation, and the soul tool slowly expanded. Isn't this my Dao Sect's flying magic tool? Seeing a flying boat similar to a boat being born, Xiaohua was indeed somewhat surprised. Who said that only your Dao Sect has flying magic tools, and my Ming Mountain doesn't? Ziming's eyes contained a smile, and he glanced at Xiaohua and said, My Ming Mountain has many, and they are not inferior to your Dao Sect's methods. You will slowly come to know in the future. Speaking up to here, the corners of Ziming's mouth were secretly bitter. When the flying boat that could accommodate 2 people took shape, Ziming jumped in first and stretched out his hand. Come, Xiaohua, I will let you see the magic of my Ming Mountain's flying boat, and the mystery of my Hutu Stronghold's Netherworld Eye. Good, I want to ask for advice. Xiaohua had already experienced life and death in Mingxi's Netherworld Wind. Although he did not have the Phoenix celestial body now, he was not unfamiliar with the Netherworld Wind. He said with a smile and also jumped in. However, before he could stand firm, Ziming's hand had already stretched out, as if he wanted to cherish every moment in the Yellow Springs Palace. Xiaohua saw that Ziming was already slightly shy, but he seemed to be used to it, and he sighed in his heart. After all, he had only treated Ziming as Zai before, and it was not easy for him to get used to it. Chapter 2893. Xiao Lang, sit tight. Ziming reminded Xiaoyu. She chanted a soul incantation, and pointed the bone staff. The airboat slowly flew up and flew toward one of the Netherworld Eyes. When it was above the Netherworld Eye, the airboat emitted a dark green brilliance. This brilliance formed a soul incantation in the air, and fell into the Netherworld Eye like snowflakes. Goo-goo, a sound like spring water gushing was heard. The Netherworld Eye's brilliance also flourished, as if it had opened its eyes. A green beam of light shot out and covered the airboat. The airboat tilted slightly and immediately fell into the Netherworld Eye. Xiaohua stood on the airboat, and saw layers of green light overflowing on the airboat. It was similar to the protective brilliance of the flowing cloud airboat. Moreover, this airboat was transparent. It was as if there was nothing under his feet. He could clearly see the situation around him. As the airboat rushed into the Netherworld Eye, a strong Netherworld wind caused the airboat to be a little bumpy. Even the green light shield on the left was extremely swaying, as if it could be annihilated at any time. Inside the Netherworld Eye, what met Xiaohua's gaze were iron corpses similar to the 9 divine guards. These iron corpses stood on the rock wall inside the Netherworld Eye. The rock wall was layered, and there were 9 iron corpses on each layer. Xiaohua saw that there were more than 10 layers, which meant that there were nearly 100 iron corpses. Oh, he was a little stunned. This Netherworld Eye, hehe, didn't I say it before? The 9 divine guards are inside the Netherworld Eye. Naturally, there are iron corpses here. Ziming smiled. Are there iron corpses in the other 5 Netherworld Eyes? Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked again. Yes, there are iron corpses in every Netherworld Eye, Ziming answered without hesitation. It's just that the exact number is uncertain. Then, is every Netherworld Eye the same, or is the Netherworld Eye you chose different? Xiaohua asked again. The netherworld I chose is naturally different, Ziming said with a smile. If it's the same, then how can I be so sure of winning? As for why it's different, Xiaolang will know in a moment. Okay, Xiaohua looked at the flying boat slowly descending against the wind. The iron corpses were like guards standing by the side, nodding slightly. The flying boat fell straight down for the size of a meal. It was probably over 10,000 feet, but it seemed that there was no end to the netherworld eye. What made Xiaohua astonished was that there seemed to be no end to the number of iron corpses, as they kept swaying in front of him. Ziming, just how many iron corpses does your Hutu stronghold have? Xiaohua couldn't help but ask. As for the specific number, I really don't know, Ziming said with a smile. Only Old Wu knows the secret. However, in my opinion, even if it isn't 200,000, it should be at least 100,000. So many. Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. He had seen the strength of the 9 divine guards. They were more powerful than late Foundation establishment stage cultivators, and were almost comparable to Jindan. If the Hutu stronghold had 200,000 iron corpses with the strength of Jindan, then the Dao sect and ordinary Xiuzhen sects, let alone ordinary sects, even the Imperial Thunder sect, would be unable to withstand a single blow, right? But before Xiaohua could recover from his shock, Ziming's words made Xiaohua's jaw drop. However, this doesn't count for much. According to Old Wu, there are still flying iron corpses, flying copper corpses and so on in Ming Mountains. Although their strength can't compare to Hanba, they are still more powerful than the 9 divine guards of my Hutu stronghold. Moreover, there are over 1 million of them. Is that true? Xiaohua was somewhat in disbelief. Why would I lie to you? Ziming said with a smile. That's why your Dao sect cultivators are so narrow-minded. You always think that my Ming Mountain soul warriors are uncivilized and think of your Xiuzhen 3 kingdoms like sword cultivators. In fact, if we wanted to, how could you be our match? That might not be the case. Xiaohua immediately realized. Your Ming Mountain's iron corpses and copper corpses are many, but they are all dead objects and still need soul warriors to control them. And these soul warriors, I'm afraid they won't be easy opponents for my Dao sect cultivators. Moreover, my Dao sect's nascent soul stage and deity stage masters are all extremely powerful. I'm afraid you guys won't be easy to deal with. What my dear Xiao says makes sense. However, I've never thought of starting a war with the Dao sect, nor have I thought much about this. Hearing this, Xiaohua thought of another matter and asked, Ziming, when you drove the flying ship and waved the bone staff, the incantation should be a soul incantation, right? Yes, Ziming rolled her eyes and knew what Xiaohua wanted to ask. Does my dear Xiao also want to chant the soul incantation? Indeed. Xiaohua answered honestly. I've also cultivated soul arts for a few days, but no matter what, I can't chant the soul incantation. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Previously, in the soul refining cave, I've also asked Master Ma Qin. He's right. Daoist Xiao, it's better if you give up. Ziming knew that Xiaohua was unwilling to give up and said with a smile, this soul incantation can only be cast by the descendants of the 12 great gods using the power of their bloodline. You're a Dao sect cultivator, so it's better if you use magic arts. Xiaohua also laughed. Don't tell me. I can't even use soul threads to exert force? Oh. Looks like Master Ma Qin. He told Daoist Xiao a lot. Ziming nodded. Soul threads can indeed pronounce the incantation, but how can it be so simple? If it could, those swordsmen and cultivators who cultivate soul arts would have long been able to chant the real soul incantation. Oh, then there's no other way? Or perhaps, I can also chant a soul incantation that isn't the real one? Xiaohua was delighted. Ziming shook her head. I don't know the method. Maybe I'll ask Elder Wu later. As for the soul incantation, it doesn't really use the power of the bloodline. Instead, it uses sword origin and true essence to activate the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Although the effect is similar, it's fundamentally different from my Ming Mountain soul arts. Speaking up to here, Ziming looked at the surrounding iron corpses and said with a frown, actually, when it comes to magic arts and soul arts, I've never been clear about them. Or rather, I admire the seniors of the Tao sect. My Ming Mountain's magic arts are inherited from the primordial era, passed down by the 20 great deities. They refine the soul, condense the bloodline, and walk the path of the 9 heavens. Although it's also borrowing the power of external objects, it's no small matter. It can affect the weather. But it's also because of this that the inheritance is getting thinner and thinner. There are fewer and fewer almighty figures who can move the clouds with a wave of their hand. The Tao sect's orthodoxy doesn't pay attention to this. Instead, it uses the body as a guide to cultivate the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, using the power of the heavenly Tao to create one's own divine ability. These divine abilities may seem small, but they use a small amount of the body's strength every time. It won't consume the bloodline or life essence. Although the weather can't be compared to my soul arts, it's easy to cultivate and can use the limitless spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Actually, as Taoist Xiao said just now, your nascent soul and deity transformation seniors can affect the situation. Although my Ming Mountain doesn't have as many soul warriors as your Tao sect, but just one of them is equivalent to several deity transformation cultivators, right? It's not impossible. That's right, Ziming is right. Xiaohua has cultivated magic and soul arts, so he naturally knows the difference between the two. The Tao sect and Ming Mountain should have 2 different cultivation paths, just like sword cultivators, Buddhism, and Confucian cultivators. Although Ming Mountain's soul arts are powerful and impossible to guard against, every time they are used, life and death are decided. But after all, it's greatly related to the bloodline. If Xiao Mao didn't have the pure bloodline of great god Shibai, he probably wouldn't even have a trace of soul energy. But that's not the case for my Tao sect. As long as one has the physique to cultivate, regardless of whether one has a bloodline or not, one can cultivate. Even Xiao Mao, who was born as a soul warrior of Ming Mountain, can smoothly cultivate to the middle stage of foundation establishment. Actually, there are so many cultivation paths in this world, just in line with the 3,000 great Taos, each with their own characteristics. Hehe, Taoist Xiao really knows a lot. Ziming pursed his lips and praised again. You even know about Buddhism and Confucian cultivators. Since you know about Confucian cultivators, can't you see the difference between my Empress Earth Stockade and other places? Hearing this, Xiaohua laughed and nodded. So that's how it is. Looks like Empress Earth Stockade also has the inheritance of Confucian cultivators. Hehe, there are some Confucian cultivators in Ming Mountain. My Empress Earth Stockade also had a Confucian cultivator, G-Man, and Confucian cultivators were even popular in Ming Mountain for a period of time. I saw it in the Shaman Codex. At that time, some shamans called themselves Zhen, and G-Man called himself Aijia. They were all borrowed from Confucian cultivators. Oh, all the palaces in my Empress Earth Stockade were built according to the ancient books of Confucian cultivators. In addition, the names of my Empress Earth Stockade's descendants were also influenced at that time. Ziming said somewhat mysteriously. Also, this G-Man now also admires Confucian cultivators very much. Oh, those Confucian cultivators! Xiaohua's face lit up as he asked. At this moment, the flying boat suddenly stopped, as if it had stopped, and then it glided smoothly. The netherworld wind also weakened a lot. Oh, we're arriving so soon. This was the second time Ziming felt that time had passed too quickly, and then he said casually, "What kind of ending can those Confucian cultivators have? Except for some ancient books, all their descendants either died, or were integrated into the people of Ming Mountain." Ancient books? Xiaohua's eyes began to turn. Don't even think about those ancient books. Ziming already understood Xiaohua's greed. Looking at the iron corpses all around them, he said, "Those are all under G-Man's control. She treasures them very much. She won't give them to you. Of course if..." At this point, Ziming's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. Splash, splash, splash. The sound of a tide gradually came from afar, and a smell of blood gradually became thicker. This is when Xiaohua saw the iron corpses soaked in the thick blood, and there was a pitch-black fog in the blood. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Chapter 2894. Xiaolang, This is the real Netherworld Sea. Seeing Xiaohua's shock, Ziming was very proud. He pointed his finger and said, "This sea is filled with nether blood. When the nether blood leaves the nether sea, it will form nether wind. The nether wind from the Yellow Springs Hall came from here." Then, what about country she's netherworld wind? Xiaohua couldn't help but ask, is the netherworld wind there the same as here? Netherworld wind? Ziming heard and shook her head slightly. I seem to have heard of it, but I have never been there, so I don't know. But this netherworld sea is boundless, and its depth is also endless. If Xiaolang has seen a place similar to netherworld sea, then I'm afraid the two are related. Since there is netherworld sea, then netherworld and 9 underworlds. Xiaohua still wanted to ask, but Ziming smiled and said, Xiaolang, you really have a lot of questions. Do you already have the idea of going to the netherworld sea to the netherworld in your mind? Why would I go to netherworld? Xiaohua was stunned. I just think that since there is netherworld sea, we should be able to reach 9 underworlds, right? Hehe, that's good. Ziming smiled. No one has ever returned alive from netherworld sea. Even in the sorcerer realm, the soul power is close to the 3rd layer of the sky. Actually, Xiaolang will know in a moment when you follow me. Oh, you and I still have plenty of time. I will take you to see the scenery of netherworld sea. Going to netherworld sea? Xiaohua was stunned. Didn't you say that no one will return alive after going in? Idiot. Ziming pulled Xiaohua's hand and said, I will not take you to the depths of netherworld sea. We will only look for netherworld orchids nearby. As he spoke, the flying boat had already flown above the netherworld sea. It was a blood pool that was dozens of feet in size. Above the blood pool was a slanted passage that Ziming and himself had flown down. On the left side of the blood pool, there were also 2 iron corpses soaking in the blood. However, this blood pool was only dozens of feet in size. It was impossible to see the entire netherworld sea. Don't release your divine sense, Ziming warned again. Your divine sense was injured by the drought demon. It was already damaged. If it is injured by the netherworld sea, then it will really be impossible to recover. I see. Xiaohua understood that a cultivator without a spiritual will was like a bird without wings. It was absolutely impossible for them to pass through this netherworld sea. Let's go. As he spoke, the flying boat tilted slightly and rushed into the blood pool. Whoosh, with a faint sound, the flying boat sank into the blood pool. Sizzling sounds were emitted from the dark green brilliance of the flying boat. Following this sound, a trace of blood light and a wisp of black gas rushed out from the blood pool. In an instant, they turned into a huge netherworld wind and rushed up the passage, almost blowing away the nearby iron corpses. When the flying boat entered the blood pool, Xiaohua's eyes were filled with blood red. The strands of black qi were like dark clouds in a clear sky, appearing and disappearing from time to time. The faint stone wall was like a reef in the sea. It stood tall in the distance and looked like a ferocious sea beast. As the flying boat dived, the black reefs gradually became less and more bloody, and felt more and more viscous. He saw Ziming drive the flying boat to a slight pause, as if she was identifying the direction. Then, she turned the boat around and flew in a certain direction. Hiss, there is no sense of direction in this blood sea. How can we identify the way? How can we return to this place? Xiaohua himself didn't know the direction, and when he arrived here, he was even more like a headless fly. Naturally, he muttered in his heart. However, seeing Ziming's confident appearance, Xiaohua's heart was also at ease. He knew that she must have some confidence. Whoosh, the flying boat flew in the blood sea for half a cup of tea's time. Suddenly, there was a sound of water. Xiaohua unconsciously turned his head back. Ah! Seeing the source of the sound, Xiaohua couldn't help but be stunned. He saw a group of monsters that looked like the surface of the water. On top of their heads was a rather large ghost face. This ghost face was very ferocious, with a sharp mouth and fangs. Xiaohua had never seen such a thing before. Hehe, seeing Xiaohua's shock, Ziming laughed. However, before she could finish laughing, several hundred small fish-like ghosts rushed to the left side of the flying boat. They surrounded the flying boat, and their small fangs began to devour the green brilliance. Go, Ziming berated. With a wave of the bone staff in her hand, The entire flying boat shone with green light, and actually scared those small ghosts away. Then a group of huge, several hundred zhang tall black shadows swam in front of the flying boat. On those black shadows, the strange ghost faces flickered slightly, and it looked like they were sneering at the flying boat. And following this huge black shadow, there were thousands of ghost and beast heads that leisurely floated about 10 zhang below it. After the time it took to finish a meal, Xiaohua's jaw was about to fall off as he saw the strange situation, and those grotesque and variegated beast heads and ghost heads appearing one by one in groups. That leisurely and contented appearance of those beasts and ghost heads. Xiaohua's jaw was about to drop. At this moment, Xiaohua finally understood the origin of the beast heads on the banners in front of the plaza in front of the Hall of the Underworld and the Netherworld Path. He also understood where the ghost heads that Ziming and the other soul warriors from the Hutu stronghold came from. Hehe, Xiaohua, these are the underworld beasts of the Netherworld Sea. If my cultivation is high enough, I can borrow their strength. Ziming looked at Xiaohua's dazed expression and said with a smile. Just now the underworld beast that devoured Mingyu is also from here. Of course. Ziming immediately understood Xiaohua's meaning and said with a smile. That is the incarnation of Hutu Great God, being summoned by the bloodline power of our Hutu stronghold, and attracted by Mingyu's soul. That underworld beast can temporarily tear open the void and come to our Hutu stronghold. Then, after the void closes, it will return to the Netherworld Sea from the Netherworld Palace, and the Netherworld Palace. Naturally, we can borrow the power of this underworld beast to find the Netherworld Sea in a short time. How long? Xiaohua nodded and asked. Midnight. Ziming said with a smile. There is more than enough time. In a short while we will find a passage, and there will be the Netherworld Orchid there. Good. Xiaohua's horizons were really broadened. But suddenly he realized something and asked in a low voice. If this underworld beast, which is called Hutu Great God's incarnation behind the Netherworld Sea, can be found after being attracted, then how did Ziyan take the 9 divine guards from here? A cold light flashed in Ziming's eyes, and he said with hatred, this is naturally Ji-man's doing. Only she has the ability to communicate with the 9 divine guards in the Netherworld Sea, and only she can take the 9 divine guards from the Netherworld Sea. In order to let Ziyan kill me, she actually consumed her soul power, and took the 9 divine guards before opening the Netherworld passage. It seems that she already has the intention to kill me. Humph, if I didn't bring Xiao Lang and the others back, if I didn't have some prestige in the Hutu stronghold, I'm afraid this trip to the Netherworld. But thinking of this, Ziming was stunned again and said anxiously, oh no, I'm afraid we still fell into her trap. She has already set up a backup plan in the Netherworld Sea. Xiaohua also understood. Quickly, let's go find the Netherworld Orchid. Yes, I understand. Previously, Ziming's mind had been filled with the sweet feeling with Xiaohua, and some of his vigilance had already faded. But at this time, he suddenly remembered that he was already in deep danger. As expected, the flying boat sped up. After a while, another big black object appeared in front of them. However, this thing was much bigger than all the nether beasts they had seen before. It was similar to the passage Xiaohua had left in the beginning. It was a large stone cliff. The flying boat didn't stop and rushed towards the dark place, and in a moment, a slightly glowing passage appeared in front of Xiaohua. However, this passage was different from the previous one. It was somewhat narrow, somewhat curved, and even filled with gravel, not smooth. It's here. Ziming urged the flying boat to rush into the passage, and then flew around in the passage. Looking at this passageway that seemed similar to an abandoned mineral vein, Xiaohua understood that this was a naturally formed passageway in the Netherworld Sea. There might be some soul wood growing inside. The passageway that he and Ziming came down should have been created by the ancestors of the Hutu stronghold with the help of this naturally formed passageway. But if they found such a natural passage in this boundless and directionless Netherworld Sea, it wouldn't be easy, right? Seeing the flying boat flying around for a while, Ziming's face was a little ugly and he muttered, no, it should be here. How? Don't worry, Xiaohua said comfortingly. While talking, a field of lush millet appeared in front of them. No, I went the wrong way. Sweat oozed from the tip of Ziming's nose. There are no millet in that place. Then we'll look for it again. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, but should we also take away these millet seeds? Of course. Ziming thought for a moment and waved the bone staff. A green light flashed on the flying boat, and the millet seeds were collected in a moment. Then Ziming didn't stop at all, and the flying boat turned around and flew back. Sweat luckily Ziming still remembered. Seeing a fork in the road, Ziming didn't hesitate at all, and always found the most correct direction. She actually found the blood pool in the passage in a shorter time than before. Xiaohua couldn't help but be convinced. If he was driving the flying boat, he would have been lost long ago. Then, Ziming easily found the passage again, but when she flew into the passage, she hesitated. What's wrong? Xiaohua's heart tightened, and he asked in a low voice, isn't it here? It seems it's not here. Ziming held Xiaohua's hand, which was a little cold, and actually broke out in a cold sweat. Hearing Ziming's words, Xiaohua instantly understood that Ziming was most likely also lost his way. Chapter 2895. Don't worry, don't worry. What could Xiaohua say? He could only force a smile and say, if we can't find the netherworld orchid, then forget it. At most, we won't let senior brother Li use the netherworld mirror. Junior brother Zhao's matter is the most important. Ziming took a deep breath and nodded slightly. I understand. I will do my best. After saying that, the flying boat no longer flew inside. It retreated and flew in another direction. However, things went beyond Xiaohua's expectations. After a few more times, the time Ziming took to find the passage gradually increased. It seemed that Ziming was no longer familiar with these places. Moreover, every time Ziming found a passage, she would only enter and then leave. Obviously, it was not the place she was looking for. Therefore, Xiaohua's heart involuntarily gave birth to a bad feeling. Because Ziming was too stubborn, an unyielding expression appeared on her face. It's here. So it's here. I thought I went the wrong way. However, when Ziming found a passage, Ziming's words and joy scattered Xiaohua's doubts. Xiaohua must be worried, right? Ziming's face was obviously relaxed. Not worried, not worried. Ziming is much stronger than this Xiao. Xiaohua said with a smile. Let's go. Let's go quickly and return quickly. We have already wasted a lot of time. Ziming did not say anything more and urged the flying boat to rush into the passage. Unfortunately, just as Xiaohua put the stone into his stomach, the situation changed dramatically. No. Wrong. This is not the place I found before. Ziming's face was red, and there was even some shame in her eyes. Seeing that Ziming was about to turn the flying boat around, Xiaohua hurriedly said, don't worry, why don't we search carefully? Maybe there will be. This Ziming was a little embarrassed. This passage is natural. If we go too deep, I will not be able to find my way back. Furthermore, not all of the tunnels had soulwood growing inside them. That netherworld orchid is the only one I've seen after searching through many passages. Since we are here, let's look for it. Xiaohua comforted. Let's not go too deep. Alright. Ziming was somewhat unconvinced, but at this time, she was already impatient and had lost her previous calmness. She could only glance at Xiaohua and urge the flying boat to fly into the passage. Sure enough, as Ziming had said, the walls of this passageway were made of solid rocks. The black-red color on the rocks was very bright. How could there be any soulwood? The two of them strolled around for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Ziming was impatient. He hesitated for a moment and asked, Xiaolang, I'm afraid there's nothing left here. Oh wait, alright. Xiaohua knew that he was just blindly giving orders. It was already good that he was able to calm his mind for a while. He immediately agreed while he was ahead. Ziming forced a smile toward Xiaohua as he turned the airboat around and hurriedly turned it over. However, when Ziming flew past a few forks, an indescribable feeling suddenly arose from Xiaohua's heart. Wait, Xiaohua hastily ordered. What's wrong? Ziming was a little puzzled, but he stopped the flying boat in time. Over there. Xiaohua didn't use his eyes to look, and instead pointed with his finger. Over there, Ziming looked at the fork that Xiaohua knew was not the one they had just passed. He couldn't help but hesitate. This Xiao feels that there's something very important there. It must be the Netherworld Orchid? Xiaohua had a feeling that it was extremely important, but he wasn't sure whether it was the Netherworld Orchid or not. All right, Ziming's face lit up with joy. He flew in the direction that Xiaohua pointed. However, the fork was extremely short. After flying for half a cup of tea, they reached the end. The inside of the passageway was bare. There was no soulwood at all. Not even a stalk of millet could be seen. It's still there. Xiaohua firmly pointed, but this time, he was pointing at the stone wall. This Ziming hesitated for a moment before urging the airboat to fly in the direction that was close to it. Under Xiaohua's finger, Ziming made 7 or 8 turns. Suddenly, a blood-red thing that was more than a foot long, had 9 sections and looked like a bamboo. It was erected in a fork that was just big enough for the airboat to pass through. Netherworld bamboo. Ziming exclaimed in an incredulous tone. Here. How could there be Netherworld bamboo? What's so strange about it? Xiaohua frowned as he looked at the Netherworld bamboo. He really didn't understand why he had such a warning in his heart. Other than the Netherworld Orchid, which is an extremely low-level item that can grow in the Netherworld Sea, the others, such as this Netherworld Bamboo and the higher-level Netherworld Lotus, all grow in the Netherworld Sea. They can't leave the Netherworld Sea of Blood. Ignore it, let's take it first. Xiaohua urged. This is much stronger than the Netherworld Orchid. This time, we will definitely win. Indeed. Ziming laughed. I didn't expect Xiaolang's feeling to be right. With that, the flying boat once again emitted a green light, and like a sharp flying sword, it sucked the Netherworld bamboo into the flying boat. Ziming smiled as he held the Netherworld bamboo and looked at Xiaohua. However, what made Ziming feel strange was that Xiaohua's gaze did not fall on the soulwood in her hand, but instead looked at the roots of the Netherworld bamboo. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Ziming asked curiously. Xiaohua bit his lips and said in a low voice, This Xiao feels. This Netherworld bamboo's roots is very important to this Xiao. Oh. Ziming was only slightly surprised, but she immediately smiled and said, Then I will give this to you as well. With that, Ziming was about to wave the bone staff again. Don't worry. Xiaohua hurriedly stopped him. It's better for this Xiao to do it himself. You must not use your divine sense. Ziming was anxious. Xiaohua smiled and said, It's fine, wouldn't it be fine if you put this Netherworld bamboo's roots into the flying boat's green light? Alright. Ziming waved the bone staff and expanded the flying boat's green light, enveloping the remaining roots of the Netherworld bamboo within. Xiaohua cautiously waved his hand, and the roots of the Netherworld bamboo fell into his hand. After thinking for a bit, he carefully put the roots of the Netherworld bamboo into a storage bag. This thing Ziming was a little surprised, but she only said a few words and urged the flying boat to return. Something's wrong. Xiaohua's face suddenly revealed a strange expression. He once again pointed forward and said, This Xiao feels. That thing is still in front. What? Ziming was completely confused. Other than the Netherworld bamboo, she couldn't think of anything else worth paying attention to. Let's go and take a look, Xiaohua said with a smile. With the matter of the Netherworld bamboo, he was still very confident in his senses. Perhaps the Netherworld orchid was in front. All right. Hearing Xiaohua's instructions, Ziming did not hesitate to urge the flying boat. It seemed that she had more confidence in Xiaohua than herself. Naturally, Xiaohua also slightly shook his head, but the little tail in his heart had long been raised to the sky. This Netherworld bamboo was really interesting. Immediately after, Ziming urged the flying boat to fly for the time it took to eat a meal, but they didn't see any more Netherworld orchids, but they collected some more millet seeds. Strange. Xiaohua scratched his head. Not to mention, Ziming looked up at Xiaohua with some concealment. Could it be that my senses are wrong? At this moment, Ziming's expression suddenly changed. Ziming, what's wrong? Xiaohua stole a glance at Ziming, feeling a little embarrassed. Naturally, he noticed her expression, and his heart unconsciously thumped as he hurriedly asked, Ziming slightly bit her lips, her eyes flashing with a trace of fear, and even a great deal of panic. Just now, when Xiaohua was collecting the netherworld bamboo root, her hand slipped away from Xiaohua's hand. Now she was silently holding on to it, but when Ziming's expression changed greatly, her hand also stiffly slipped away from Xiaohua's hand. What's wrong? Quickly tell me. Xiaohua saw the situation and knew that it was not good, so he hurriedly asked. Xiaohua, I'm lost. Ziming bit her lips until they turned white, and it was as pale as her face. She knew very well that losing her way in the Netherworld Sea was far more dangerous than losing her way in Ming Mountains. Hiss, hearing Ziming's words, Xiaohua also sucked in a breath of cold air. This was what he was most afraid of. Moreover, he immediately understood that it was his blind guidance, especially when Ziming was a little excited after obtaining the Netherworld bamboo. After flying for so long, she had long lost the way back. Can you find the way back? Xiaohua asked tentatively. Or when he spoke up to hear. Xiaohua himself was greatly shocked. Earlier, Ziming had clearly said that the Netherworld path was opened by the clone of the Nether Beast, Hutu, and there was a time limit. If they didn't return before midnight, then the Netherworld path would be blocked. How would he and Ziming return to the Nether Spring Hall? Earth escape? Xiaohua's heart suddenly relaxed, and he looked at the surrounding passages, but then he shook his head. Nonsense. If the Netherworld Sea was below the Yellow Springs Palace, why would the Netherworld Beast be needed to open the passage? There must be some kind of spatial vein, or something in the middle. Xiaohua smiled bitterly, took the initiative to reach out and hold Ziming's hand, and said, "It's not your fault, it's all this Zhao's own initiative to point out the direction. If we had followed your previous guidance, there would have been no problem." Xiaohua, it was rare for Xiaohua to take the initiative to reach out his hand, and Ziming's face once again flushed red, and she said somewhat shyly, "It's all my fault, just now oh? Just now what?" Xiaohua was puzzled. Just now in the Netherworld path, I softly prayed to the Huta great god. If with Xiaohua at this point. Ziming's face was completely red, and she did not dare to continue. It seemed that she was somewhat different from the straightforward women of Ming Mountains. Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. He already knew in his heart what Ziming wanted to say. Ziming hesitated and said, "I did not expect that the Huta great god really heard my words, but I did not expect that the Huta great god would use this kind of method to realize my wish." Chapter 2896. That although Xiaohua was very touched in his heart, but, speaking of feelings, it didn't seem to be as profound as that of Huang Mengxiang in Tianmen Mountain. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's thoughts actually ran away. I really don't know how that little girl Huang Mengxiang is now. If she knew that I was buried in Ming Mountain, would she shed a tear? Just when Xiaohua was a little distracted, the flying boat was still flying slowly. Ziming suddenly cried out in joy. This is another passage under the Netherworld Eye. No, not that, but it's not far away. When I was training together, I came here before." "Really?" Xiaohua's heart suddenly relaxed, and he said with some disbelief, "Absolutely. Look." Ziming pointed at a place and said, There are 2 marks. When Zai and I passed by here, we specially carved them." Sure enough, when Xiaohua looked carefully along Ziming's finger, there was indeed an arrow in the direction where the flying boat was heading. It's Zai," Ziming said happily. "Zai was afraid that we would get lost, so he gave us directions here." That's right, it's all thanks to Zai." Xiaohua also smiled, but then, the flying boat flew in Ziming's memory for a while, and Xiaohua was surprised again. Because the flying boat's direction, although it was a little winding, was exactly the same as the direction he felt strange. Ziming, who had escaped from the threat of death, was also very happy at this time. She looked at Xiaohua a little coquettishly. Although she didn't say anything, her flower-like smile was full of charm. Xiaolang in the end. Ziming still spoke. "I'll take you back. Your so-called Netherworld orchid. We don't want it anymore. I'm afraid that I'll get lost again." "It doesn't matter." Xiaohua shrugged, tilted his head and said, The direction you're flying in is the same as the direction I thought. Maybe we'll meet the netherworld orchid in a while? Ah. Ziming covered her mouth with the bone staff in her left hand and said in surprise. Xiaolang, could it be that the perception just now is the way back? Oh, that's right. It seems that this is the fastest way back. As for whether there's the netherworld orchid or not. It's possible? Tisk, it's possible that it's the nether orchid. Xiaohua curled his lips, extremely distrustful of himself. If I say that this is the way back that I found, then that's absolutely impossible. But it's true. Ziming laughed. If we have the netherworld orchid, that would be even better. Unfortunately, even though Ziming was looking carefully, Xiaohua, who was beside him, couldn't find the nether orchid. After seeing a few forks in the road and seeing the blood pool, Ziming still couldn't find the nether orchid. Done. Ziming heaved a long sigh of relief, and then he pointed at the blood pool and said, Xiaolang, once you enter the blood pool, you'll be able to return in less than 1,000 feet. This concubine remembers it clearly. Okay. Stop. Xiaohua nodded slightly and shifted his gaze away from the blood pool. He casually looked at the fork in the road that he had just walked through. What he saw shocked him greatly. What happened? Although Ziming and Xiaohua were standing together, they were half a body in front of each other. Because of that, they were blocked by the black and red cliff, so they didn't see anything. When she took half a step back and looked again, she also turned pale with fright. This what's going on? Yes, it was impossible for Ziming and Xiaohua not to be surprised, because on the fork in the road, there were already more than 10 spirit warriors lying on the ground. The heads of these spirit warriors were all covered in blood. It was obvious that their brains had already been eaten. Are these the spirit warriors that came with us? Xiaohua narrowed his eyes, and his gaze quickly swept through the entire tunnel as he asked this question. Should be. Ziming naturally wasn't sure, but just as she was about to urge the airship to go check it out, a bubbling sound came from the blood pool in the distance. Ziming suddenly turned around and looked at the blood pool. She saw that there were indeed countless bubbles surging within the blood pool. Moreover, as these bubbles came out, gusts of netherworld wind spiraled out and blew straight at the airship she was driving. The wind was extremely strong, and the airship was somewhat swaying. Not good. Go quickly. Suddenly, just as Ziming was doing her best to maintain the airship, Xiaohua's expression changed and he hurriedly shouted. Ziming didn't understand, but when she heard Xiaohua's order, she immediately pointed the bone staff in her hand. Regardless of the bumps, she was about to urge the airship to move. Boom! With a loud sound, Ziming felt a strong force coming from above her head. The entire airship was like a meteor rushing into the tunnel. Clang clang clang, the airship hit the tunnel. The green light was restrained, and the entire airship made a noise. Ziming was caught off guard, and her body lost balance. She even felt dizzy. Careful! Xiaohua's voice sounded in Ziming's ears. A strong force came from Xiaohua's hand and pulled Ziming back. Only now did Ziming clearly see that right above her head, on top of the airship, there was a tentacle that was several feet long. It was like a huge canopy, and it was slapping the green light above the airship. Moreover, that tentacle was growing out from the walls of the tunnel. Ziming was shocked, but before she could ask, "Woo!" there was another strange sound of wind. From the left side of the airship, another tentacle suddenly stretched out and smashed towards the airship. Quick! Ziming encouraged herself in her heart, but that tentacle was extremely fast in the netherworld wind. Just as Ziming was about to dodge, the tentacle had already smashed into the airship. Boom! The entire airship was sent flying and hit the wall of the tunnel. Although Ziming was pulled by Xiaohua, the two of them were still balanced and were far from being battered and exhausted. However, the light on the airship was hit twice by the tentacle and hit the tunnel again. It was extremely dim. Ziming obviously didn't expect to be attacked here. She hurriedly waved the bone staff in her hand. The green light on the bone staff flashed, and it flew towards the airship. The airship suddenly shone brightly, wanting to protect the two of them again. Unfortunately, it only flashed for a moment. Rumble! There was another loud sound. A huge sphere rushed out from below the airship and directly hit the airship. Needless to say, the entire airship soared into the sky again and hit the wall of the tunnel. The entire light suddenly shrank to the size of a fist and fell on the tunnel. Xiaohua and Ziming's figures were revealed from the green light of the airship. Zzzt, there was a violent sound of cold water being poured into hot oil. The moment Xiaohua's figure was revealed, something came out from the light protecting his body. Xiaohua turned pale with fright. When he looked down, it was the light protecting his body being corroded by the netherworld wind. This was something he had never encountered in Mingxi before. The reason why Xiaohua was so calm was because he had the experience of escaping from Mingxi's netherworld wind. He felt that even the netherworld wind was just so. Although the netherworld sea was dangerous, as long as he and Ziming didn't go too deep, they wouldn't encounter any great danger. However, he didn't expect that he would encounter such a test right after he came out from the protection of the airship. If even the golden light protecting his body was corroded by the netherworld wind, then what about the others? No wonder the cultivators of Dao sect were so afraid of millions of Ming mountains. It really made sense. Looking at Ziming again, after her figure was revealed from the green light, her entire body was flashing with a green light. The light started flashing from her head and quickly passed through her entire body, protecting her within the green light. Xiaohua, Ziming saw something strange about Xiaohua's body. That golden light was flashing. How could she not know that he was in danger? Roar! A deafening roar came from the direction of the blood pool in the distance. Just as Ziming cried out in shock, countless gusts of ghastly wind were swept up and rushed into the tunnel. Xiaohua raised his head and saw a monster of a few feet in size slowly walking out from the blood pool. The drops of netherworld water were like fist-sized blood droplets, dripping down from the monster's body. It was extremely bloody. Of course, as soon as these blood droplets left the monster, the surface layer immediately evaporated, turning into gusts of netherworld wind and rushing into the tunnel. The entire tunnel began to vibrate rapidly, producing an extremely ear-piercing sound of wind. Great God Hutu? Ziming also looked towards the source of the sound. When she saw that the monster had a human body, and that snake tail was slowly emerging from the blood pool, Ziming couldn't help but moan. She definitely didn't expect that the great god she worshipped would actually send out a clone to attack her. This shouldn't be the great god Hutu of Ming Mountains. Although Xiaohua was hastily thinking about how to solve the problem in front of him, he was also staring at the appearance of the monster. Seeing the monster coming out from the blood pool, he said indifferently, "That's right. This is definitely not." After Ziming recovered from her shock, she also saw clearly that the monster's human body looked similar from the side, but when the monster slightly turned its body, the outline of the human body had already disappeared. Especially the few peacock feather-like antennae on its back. Where did it look like the 7 hands of the great god Hutu? However, although Ziming had already discovered the details of the monster, she didn't have time to think about it anymore. Her whole body suddenly floated up, throwing herself into Xiaohua's arms. Oh! Xiaohua was slightly startled, thinking that she was afraid. His left hand pulled her soft hand and whispered, "Don't be afraid." However, before he could finish speaking, Ziming had already thrown herself into his arms. However, Ziming wasn't facing him, but with her back facing Xiaohua, she shouted, "Xiaohua, quickly hug me." Moreover, Ziming's other hand also brought Xiaohua's hand to her waist, where her abdomen was. Soon after, that hand decisively broke free from Xiaohua's hand. At this moment, Xiaohua was hugging Ziming from behind. He was very familiar with this posture. He was greatly puzzled. However, when he saw that the green light around Ziming's body was also protecting him, and the sound of the golden light corroding his body was getting smaller and smaller, he finally understood Ziming's painstaking efforts. Chapter 2897. Ziming didn't have time to care about the ambiguity of this position, nor did she have time to explain to Xiaohua. As soon as her hand left Xiaohua's hand, she immediately patted the soul nest, and the soul tool that looked like a wizard token was taken out from the soul nest. Moreover, with a flash in front of Xiaohua's eyes, The 9 divine guards that Ziming had put into the soul nest were also released. Papa, Ziming waved the wizard token without hesitation, and a few wisps of faint green light visible to the naked eye flashed. Then, she patted her hand, and the 9 divine guards pounced toward the nether beast along the passage. Ziming's series of movements were extremely fast. The nether beast had just stepped out of the blood pool, and it hadn't even straightened its body. Go, Xiaohua was alert in his heart. He grabbed Ziming's slender waist with his hand and urged his magic power, and the 2 figures floated up. Boom! A tentacle that was exactly the same as the nether beast's tentacle struck out from the left side where the 2 of them were standing just now. After hitting the place where Xiaohua and Ziming were standing just now, it suddenly disappeared. Xiaohua, don't use too much magic power. Ziming felt a burst of heat behind her back, and her heart was also jumping, but she still didn't forget to remind him. Okay. Xiaohua looked around and said in a low voice, "This place isn't far from the passage down, right?" "Yes." Ziming urged the 9 divine guards while answering. "In which direction?" Xiaohua asked. Although Ziming didn't answer Xiaohua's question, she still pointed in a direction and said, "From the blood pool to that place." Before Ziming finished speaking, Ziming felt a burst of brilliance in front of her eyes. Her waist tightened, and her figure flew in the direction she knew. But then, there was a loud bang. Everything disappeared again. Her figure also stopped at the side of the stone wall. "Xiaohua, what are you doing?" Ziming looked back with some confusion, and looked at Xiaohua while rubbing her head awkwardly. "Oh right." Ziming looked at the stone wall and suddenly realized something, and hurriedly said, "This stone wall is soaked in the nether blood, and the Dao Sec's 5 elements escape technique can't be used." Just as Ziming said this, a loud roar came from the blood pool in the distance. The roars rose and fell one after another. The 9 divine guards had surrounded the nether beast, and were also letting out unpleasant roars. 9 pairs of arms had stretched out and shrouded the nether beast in an indescribable deathly stillness. The nether beast's body was trembling violently as if the 9 divine guards were going to tear it apart. Roar! The underworld beast cried out in pain. Cracks had already appeared on its black leather armor, and traces of blood that looked like green liquid seeped out. Good. Seeing that the 9 divine guards were so valiant, Xiaohua's heart was also greatly relieved. Since the 9 divine guards were able to deal with the nether beast, he naturally didn't need to be too afraid. However, just as he finished praising, another tentacle suddenly emerged from the top of his head and slammed down. Not good. Xiaohua's figure moved, and he secretly said in his heart, "Not good." Sure enough, just as Xiaohua's figure dodged the tentacle, there was a loud bang, and the same tentacle stretched out from under the foot of a divine guard, and suddenly grabbed the divine guard's waist. The divine guard's body was overflowing with green light, and the divine guard's stiff body was also violently struggling. Pung! With a loud bang, the divine guard's waist turned into 4 pieces, and the dark liquid also splashed a lot of the passage. Hiss! Although Xiaohua had already perceived the power of the nether beast, he didn't expect it to be so powerful. Then, pung pung, with a series of muffled sounds, several divine guards were killed by the tentacles that suddenly stretched out. The fragments flew everywhere, and the black liquid splashed everywhere. Go! Xiaohua didn't dare to stay any longer, and was about to fly away. Boom! Unfortunately, he had just moved when the nether beast actually knew his intentions. 2 tentacles stretched out from the stone wall, and blocked in front of Xiaohua. "Ziming, come behind me." Xiaohua loosened his grip and ordered Ziming. "Okay." Ziming originally wanted to deal with the nether beast, but when he saw that 5 of the 9 divine guards had been lost in a moment, his face was incomparably pale. When he heard Xiaohua's order, he had no choice but to respond. He turned around and leaned on Xiaohua's back, reaching out and hugging Xiaohua's waist. "Let me show you the power of this young master." Xiaohua roared and took out the wishful staff. With a bang, it hit the tentacle that had just stretched out. With a loud bang, the tentacle shattered, and a gust of netherworld wind was born from inside. Damn it, as expected. Xiaohua's phoenix celestial body was made of netherworld wind, so naturally, he was not familiar with this thing. Go! Xiaohua didn't dare to hesitate anymore. Regardless of the direction, He continued to fly towards the distance of the passage using the wind escape technique. Xiaohua had just flown a few feet when a fierce wind came from behind his head. Xiaohua was helpless. He slightly lifted the wishful staff in his hand, then raised it and smashed it in the direction of the wind. With a loud bang, a huge force that he had never encountered before came from the wishful staff. Xiaohua's arm was sore, and his whole body was lifted above the passage. Hiss! Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. Before his figure stopped in midair, he saw a black shadow in front of him. The monster's figure was actually born from the rock wall, blocking the direction of Xiaohua's escape. Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly turned his head to look. Sure enough, the remaining 4 divine guards were smashed by the nether beast in an instant. The ground was in a mess, and the nether beast had disappeared. Buzz buzz, 2 loud noises sounded, and 2 black shadows pressed in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Bang bang, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He waved the wishful staff again and blocked in front of his body. Although Xiaohua had borrowed the force of the attack, the huge force hit Xiaohua diagonally into the blood pool. Xiaohua, rush into the blood pool. Maybe we can. While they were talking, an indescribable blood-red brilliance fell from the sky and hit the 2 of them. With a squeaking sound, Ziming's face was pale, and the green light also quickly faded. Seeing this, Xiaohua hurriedly urged the Buddha's Saraira to pour out the primordial true water, turning it into a thin layer to block the threatening netherworld wind. The green light on Ziming's body disappeared, and her face was very ugly. When her eyes swept over the primordial true water, she immediately noticed that something was wrong and hurriedly retracted her gaze. However, this primordial true water really blocked the netherworld water outside. Although outside, the netherworld wind was constantly rushing into the primordial true water, and the primordial true water was constantly bubbling and disappearing. It seemed that Xiaohua had a lot of primordial true water, so there was no problem for the time being. Go! Xiaohua once again whispered. He didn't know the consequences of the primordial true water entering the blood pool, but he knew that if he stayed here, he would not have a good end. Buzz! Another tentacle really fast. Even with Xiaohua's current cultivation, he couldn't figure out how it appeared. All of a sudden, it hit Xiaohua's back. Boom! The primordial true water was hit and scattered. Xiaohua's figure was also hit and lost his balance. He flipped a few times in the air and hit the stone wall heavily. Ziming. Xiaohua was a little dizzy and couldn't stabilize himself, so he immediately called out. I'm fine. Ziming heard Xiaohua's concern and was ecstatic. She hurriedly responded. That tentacle avoided me and hit Xiaohua. Ah? Xiaohua was shocked and said involuntarily, this nether beast, it turned out to be looking for Xiaohua. Of course, Ziming also said involuntarily. This nether beast has been worshipped by my Huta village for many years. I have never heard of it attacking a spirit warrior. Today when Xiaohua appeared, there was immediately such a change. Ziming. Xiaohua turned his head and looked at another fork not far away. He patted her arm and said, quickly fly away. If it wants to find Xiaohua, you will be safe. Moreover, if you follow Xiaohua, you will delay Xiaohua's work. Okay, Ziming bit her lips slightly, knowing that what Xiaohua said was true. Although she didn't want to leave Xiaohua, she really couldn't help at all in the face of the nether beast. Immediately, Ziming urged her soul power to fly out of Xiaohua's primordial true water, and flew toward another passage in fear. Just as Xiaohua thought, the nether beast didn't care about Ziming at all. The snake tail of several feet long waved again, and attacked him with a strong wind. Good, Xiaohua breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that it was the effect of Ziming's bloodline. He hurriedly raised the wishful steel rod in his hand and met it. Boom! The force was stronger than the tentacles. Xiaohua's arms were sore and numb, and his whole body and mind flew out again. Kill! Xiaohua finally reached the end of his strength. He put away the wishful steel rod and took out the sword gourd. The spirit execution yuan light rushed out from it, cutting through the wind of the netherworld, and heading toward the head of the nether beast Shua. With a soft sound, the spirit execution yuan light lightly swept over the head of the nether beast. However, the scene that Xiaohua expected did not appear. Not only was there no blood splashing from the head of the beast, but it also did not fall. It was as if the spirit execution yuan light had no effect on it. Yes, this nether beast is a dead thing, Xiaohua suddenly realized. Presumably this spirit execution can't kill the nether beast? Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly thought of the soul essence of the three-legged bird in the space. That day, it suddenly suppressed his soul. If the spirit execution yuan light had the soul essence of this thing, he didn't know if it could kill the nether beast? It was a pity that Xiaohua only had a flash of inspiration. Everything was no different from a flash in the pan. At this time, there was no other way except to escape toward the blood pool. Seeing that Xiaohua had already reached the blood pool, he hesitated a little and was about to jump in. But suddenly, an indescribable feeling came from the blood pool. Ah! This feeling had always been found by Xiaohua and Ziming. When they saw the nether beast, Xiaohua thought that it was the nether beast, but who would have thought that it was not the nether beast? Roar! Just as Xiaohua hesitated for a moment, another beast roar came from the blood pool, but a tentacle of several feet in size rose from the blood pool again. This tentacle was not only completely similar to the tentacle of the nether beast, but it could also roar by itself. Chapter 2898. Damn it! This nether beast. Xiaohua turned pale with fright. He didn't expect that the nether beast still had a hidden hand here. If he hadn't hesitated just now, he would have already been sent to the tentacle. However, before Xiaohua's great shock could pass through his heart, the tentacle fell like a big tree, bringing a black shadow with it as it fell. A kind of coldness that made one's heart die was born around Xiaohua. Although Xiaohua's body was protected by the innate true water, the death aura passed through the innate true water and firmly suppressed the vitality in Xiaohua's body. Buddha's Saraira, spiritual fire. Xiaohua's heart was like dead ashes. He knew that he had fallen into a certain death situation today. If the last Buddha's Saraira and spiritual fire were not effective, he was afraid that he would really die. However, Xiaohua didn't dare to place his hopes on the Buddha's Saraira. His cultivation was too shallow. At this time, the only thing he took out was this nether beast's dessert. Perhaps it was only the spiritual fire. Seeing the black shadow fall, Xiaohua's spiritual power seemed to be difficult to activate. Goldie, Xiaohua's heart suddenly lit up again. He thought of Goldie that could suck souls. Wasn't that guy the nemesis of these nether beasts? Thinking, Xiaohua hurriedly entered the space. However, after Goldie had sucked the devil general's soul, it had been sleeping. At this time he couldn't wake it up at all. Come out for your mother. Xiaohua didn't feel sorry for Goldie at this time. Your mother can't escape now, but you're still sleeping sweetly. As Xiaohua dragged Goldie out of the space, a small figure suddenly blocked in front of Xiaohua. Of course, Xiaohua paid close attention to the nether beast's reaction. If there was any abnormality, he would immediately take Goldie into the space. Woo! As if it was mournful, the nether beast's tentacle suddenly stopped. It seemed that there was something in front of it that it was extremely afraid of. Good. Seeing this, Xiaohua was overjoyed. At this time, Goldie lazily opened its eyes. It seemed that the nether beast's tentacle was white. The tentacle was like a person being stung by a wasp and immediately retracted. However, before Xiaohua's joy of escaping with his life could overflow in front of his chest, a black shadow flashed above his head like a black cloud. Roar! The nether beast from before appeared next to the tentacle again. The tentacle rose into the air and landed on the nether beast's back. The tentacle danced in the air and slowly curled up. The nether beast let out a loud roar. The two blood-red eyes on the strange beast's head flashed with a red light. A strong aura of death surged and pounced toward Xiaohuang. Goldie's body shivered, and its large tail wrapped around itself. It seemed to be cold, and its eyes narrowed again. This is bad. Seeing this, Xiaohua already somewhat understood that Little Yellow should be the nemesis of these underworld beasts. It was probably because it was too small, or perhaps because it was in a deep sleep. These underworld beasts were afraid at first, but when they saw that Little Yellow was not a real threat, they began to fight back. When Xiaohua saw the python-like tail whipping towards Little Huang at lightning speed, how could he dare to be careless? He hastily put Little Huang away and opened his mouth, preparing to spit out the last bit of spirit fire. But right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Boom! There was a deafening tremor, and the entire passage, no, the entire world was shaking violently. Not only was Xiaohua's figure unable to stand in midair, but even the aggressive nether beast's entire figure was swaying, unable to stand steadily. Countless gravel and debris flew into the air. Boom, boom, boom. There was a series of tremors, gravel flying out in succession, blood splashing out in succession, and a series of nether wind rushing into the air. Xiaohua only felt that his entire field of vision was shaking. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. Straight, straight, straight. A series of strange cries rang out amidst the rumbling, followed by the loud roars of the underworld beasts. Then, the entire space began to tremble and sway again. What's going on? Xiaohua struggled to stand up and urged his magical power. He was really about to bring out the true water again. At this time, a warm body hugged him from behind, and his body flew into the air. Feeling a layer of faint green light protecting him, Xiaohua naturally knew that it was Ziming. However, there was still gravel and blood splashing in front of him, and the hurricane continued. He couldn't see anything at all. After waiting for half a meal, Ziming brought him up to a high altitude. Only then did he see clearly that the previously intact passage and the incomparably sturdy rock walls had now been smashed apart. Not only was there no passage, even the blood pool had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a large nether blood sea. On this nether sea, the nether wind blew violently, and above the blood sea, near the rock wall, in the fierce wind, there were two nether beasts frantically fighting. One of the nether beasts was the one with the body of a beast and the tail of a snake, while the other was 10 feet long, like a huge ladybug. However, this ladybug had a lot of bone spurs on its back, and there were more than a dozen sharp claws under its body. At this time, the later nether beast was pouncing on the previous nether beast. Those dozens of sharp claws were crazily chopping on the nether beast's body, and pieces of pitch-black flesh with black threads were pulled out from the nether beast's body. The previous nether beast was also ferocious. The tentacles on its back also grabbed the opponent's body, and large pieces of flesh were also knocked off. In particular, the nether beast's tail, which was like a poisonous snake, now had a shiny barb at the tip of the tail. Every time it swung, it would pierce into the nether beast's body, and large pieces of flesh would also be shot off. However, what was even more strange was that although a lot of flesh and blood had fallen off the two nether beasts' bodies, where the flesh and blood fell, traces of black gas gushed out. The blood water of the surrounding nether sea rushed into the black gas, and new pieces of flesh and blood grew at a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye. These two nether beasts were flying on the nether sea. Sometimes they fell into the sea, and sometimes they rushed up the cliff. While blood splashed everywhere, the stone walls were like rotten stones under the tentacles, sharp claws and snake tail. Large pieces of stone fell down, and every time a stone wall was hit, the entire space would shake violently. Hiss, seeing this earth-shattering battle, and seeing that many parts of the two nether beasts were beginning to reveal white bones, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. He knew in his heart that even if he used his spiritual fire, it would be impossible to cause any fatal damage to these nether beasts. These two nether beasts seemed to be the legendary undead nether beasts, right? Xiaolang Ziming's face was also snow white. Where did these nether beasts come from? Why are they so powerful? If you don't know, how would I know? Xiaohua also whispered and then asked, these two nether beasts, what are their names? I don't know. The previous nether beast. My Huta village has always regarded it as the avatar of the Huta god. And, looking at its appearance just now, it seemed to be afraid of my bloodline. As for the latter one, I have never seen it before. Ziming had obviously never seen such a vast battle, and her body, which was hugging Xiaohua's waist, was trembling slightly. Let's go quickly. Xiaohua hurriedly turned his head, but just as he said half a sentence, he shut his mouth. Now the entire space had been destroyed by these two nether beasts. Not to mention the passage, even the cracks had disappeared. All the nether wind that had been stimulated was circling in the space. Occasionally some nether wind would leak out, but it was also extremely small cracks. With Xiaohua's transformation technique, it would be difficult for him to pass through. What should we do? Xiaohua smiled bitterly, and could only look to the left of the nether beasts that were fighting. It seems that if we want to escape, we can only go through the place where the two nether beasts are fighting, and go through other passages. However, the two nether beasts were fighting fiercely, and flesh and stone fragments were flying continuously. Countless fierce death chi was crisscrossing in the space. How could the two of them pass through? Alas, nascent soul cultivators are just children. At this time, Xiaohua had seen the battle of the undead nether beasts, and really looked down on the so-called nascent soul cultivators. This nether beast seems to be the enemy of that nether beast. Ziming also looked to the left, and seeing that there was no way, she whispered, "Otherwise, how could it help us?" When Xiaohua heard this, his heart moved, and the previous warning sign seemed to have disappeared. Strange. Could it be that the warning sign came from this nether beast? But just when Xiaohua was puzzled in his heart, suddenly, a faintly discernible sound of music came from the netherworld sea. This sound was extremely faint, but in this great battle that seemed to be able to destroy the world, it was extremely clear. A kind of joy that Xiaohua had never felt before was born in his heart, and a kind of floating feeling was instantly born from Xiaohua's body. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, Xiaohua felt that there was a burst of light and shadow in front of his eyes, and the whole world had changed, and he was also floating up. Xiaohua didn't have time to check himself, but his gaze was attracted by the changes in the netherworld sea. In the depths of the netherworld sea, a huge black shadow was slowly floating over, and a blurry shadow was coiling around the black shadow. The beautiful music was coming from the black shadow. The two nether beasts that were fighting to the death a moment ago had already calmed down. One of them was swinging its snake tail, and countless ripples were rippling all over its body. Its body was trembling, and its body was slowly sinking into the netherworld sea, as if it was extremely afraid of the music, and as if it was doing its best to resist the music. The other nether beast was like a ladybug, and its body was flashing with a faint golden light. The golden light also turned into a powerful ripple in front of the nether beast. This golden light is somewhat familiar. When Xiaohua saw this golden light, he felt that it was extremely familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. Just when Xiaohua was feeling surprised, he suddenly saw that not far from where the two nether beasts were fighting, a soul warrior was walking out from a crack in the stone wall. His face had a look of infatuation as he stepped into the netherworld sea. As the soul warrior's figure fell into the netherworld sea, the flesh and blood of this soul warrior were rapidly shaved off, turning into a body of white bones. The soul of this soul warrior then broke free from this body of flesh and blood, and continued to walk towards the netherworld sea, in the direction where the music was coming from. Chapter 2899. Soon after, another 1, 2, 3. In just a moment, more than 10 spirit warriors rushed out of the crack one after another. Their faces were filled with infatuation as they threw themselves into the netherworld sea. One by one, their souls were born from their bodies. The Xiaohua was startled. Why am I seeing their souls? When they came out, why am I flying? At this moment, Xiaohua came to his senses and hurriedly looked at himself. However, when he saw himself, he was even more shocked. At this moment, what was flying in the air was no longer Xiaohua's physical body, but Xiaohua's primordial spirit that had always been cultivating in the clear spirit heaven. This humanoid primordial spirit was now dancing slowly, as if it was in the clear spirit heaven. Countless soul strands were waving around like long sleeves. Even the primordial spirit of the little white dragon flew out beside Xiaohua's primordial spirit, and also danced. An extremely intoxicated feeling came from the dance. Xiaohua had already come to his senses, but his primordial spirit was no longer under his control. It was being guided by the mysterious music and slowly flew over the netherworld sea. When Xiaohua looked back, his physical body was standing in the same place as before. His body was emitting a faint golden light. This golden light was exactly the same as the one he saw on the body of the nether beast in the netherworld sea. Xiaohua suddenly realized what was going on. Just now, when the music had played, he had been bewitched, just like the other soul warriors. But because of the golden light, his fleshly body hadn't been affected. However, there was a primordial spirit in his soul. This primordial spirit could not escape this music, so his mind actually escaped from his physical body and entered this primordial spirit. And this primordial spirit replaced his physical body. Like the souls of those spirit warriors, it flew towards the mysterious black shadow. Ziming. When Xiaohua looked again, he found that Ziming was hugging his body, and his hand was wrapped around his waist. Although he could see Ziming's intoxicated expression from the side, and even his feet were moving, Xiaohua still couldn't help but laugh. But Xiaohua's physical body was majestic and unmoving, so Ziming naturally could not move either. Good, Xiaohua cried out in relief. His heart relaxed slightly. A tentacle-like black shadow with a faint golden light stretched out from the netherworld sea and grabbed at Xiaohua's primordial spirit. Clang, there was a metallic sound, and a sword-like brilliance flashed, cutting this black shadow in half. When the black shadow shrank back, Xiaohua could clearly see that it was the nether beast that came later from the golden light. This underworld beast is really strange. Xiaohua felt very strange in his heart. He tried his best to struggle, but this primordial spirit had no power to resist the music. It could only follow the souls of the spirit warriors and fly into the depths of the netherworld sea. Suddenly, the entire space was filled with light. A huge underworld beast flashing with an extremely enchanting red light floated out of the netherworld sea. This underworld beast was like a giant turtle, but it had a dozen thick feet that alternated in the bloodstains. On its back, which was like a small mountain, was an even stranger underworld beast. This underworld beast looked like a rabbit. It had 2 long ears and a blood-red body that was several feet long. However, on this blood-red body, there were dozens of wriggling blood tongues. The extremely beautiful sound was emitted from these blood tongues. The giant tortoise was very large, but its speed was also very fast. When Xiaohua's primordial spirit flew into the netherworld sea, the tortoise was already in front of him. Xiaohua's primordial spirit and many other souls swept across the netherworld sea. Many of the underworld beasts in the sea were attracted, but when they came in contact with this mysterious music, most of the underworld beasts were like the spirit warriors. Their heads were filled with intoxication as they slowly gathered on the surface of the sea. Only a few of them fought like the 2 underworld beasts. They seemed to want to escape, but no matter how hard they struggled, these underworld beasts couldn't escape. Swish swish, countless sounds like raindrops fell. Like multicolored rays of light, hundreds of tentacles flew out from the blood tongues of the underworld beast. Some of them fell into the netherworld sea. When these tentacles touched the underworld beasts, they immediately flew up as if they were weightless and were thrown into the blood tongues of the underworld beast. The souls of the spirit warriors were easily pulled by the tentacles, and were swallowed into the blood tongues of the underworld beast. Seeing a tentacle grabbing his primordial spirit, Xiaohua struggled with some unwillingness and tried his best to twist. The countless soul threads also wrapped around the tentacle. However, the strength of the tentacle was far from what Xiaohua's primordial spirit could compare to. With a gentle pull, Xiaohua's primordial spirit drew an arc in the air, and fell into the blood tongues of the underworld beast. The soul of the little white dragon beside Xiaohua seemed to have no power to resist and fell into the blood tongues with Xiaohua. A huge squirming blood-red hole was right in front of Xiaohua's primordial spirit. It was unfathomably deep. Xiaohua's primordial spirit released all the soul threads, wanting to block this hole and not let his primordial spirit fall in. It was like a spider web. At this critical moment, the soul threads actually stuck to the blood-red hole and temporarily prevented the underworld beast from swallowing his primordial spirit. However, it was only a moment before the blood-red hole in Xiaohua's primordial spirit looked like an enormous blood tongue. Boom! It smashed into Xiaohua's primordial spirit. Squeak squeak, a strange noise came out from the blood tongue. When the blood tongue rose, Xiaohua's primordial spirit also rose along with it. Xiaohua's soul threads were actually extremely sharp and firmly wrapped around the blood tongue. Moreover, faint lightning appeared on it, corroding the bloody tongue. Good, seeing that there was actually a trace of hope at the moment of despair, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He didn't know anything else, but Xiaohua still knew how to dance his soul threads. He immediately gathered all the soul threads and wrapped them around the blood tongue while trembling. There was no need for Xiaohua to do anything. The light purple lightning threads appeared naturally and quickly corroded the blood tongue. The corrosive pitch-black liquid seeped into the soul threads and fell on the primordial spirit bit by bit. It was not only Xiaohua's side that had a great change. Just when Xiaohua wrapped the soul threads around the blood tongue, Kacha! A thunderous roar came from the side. And at the same time, a dragon roar came from the soul of Little White Dragon. The dragon roar suddenly disrupted the music of the nether beasts. Those lost nether beasts woke up and fled into the depths of the netherworld sea. The two nether beasts that were fighting before also hurriedly scattered, diving into the depths of the netherworld sea and disappearing. Along with Little White Dragon's dragon roar, the lightning struck the blood tongue of the underworld beast, and a hole as thick as a bowl appeared on the body of the underworld beast. Meow meow. The rabbit-like underworld beast actually made a sound like a cat. While maintaining the music, it grabbed at Little White Dragon with several tentacles. Whoosh! Little White Dragon swung its dragon body and agilely dodged the tentacles. Like a sharp arrow, it rushed into the body of the underworld beast. Then a loud kacha sound came from the underworld beast's body. A bloody hole the size of a foot appeared from the underworld beast. Little White Dragon immediately rushed out of the underworld beast's body. The bloody hole seemed like it was about to close up, but the flashes of lightning and arcs of electricity lingered around the hole, preventing it from closing up. Xiaohua's primordial spirit was stuck by the blood tongue. As the body of the underworld beast trembled, the primordial spirit was also extremely bumpy. Xiaohua's soul threads that had been hit by the lightning tribulation were now extremely hard and sharp. They cut the blood tongue and quickly corroded it. In just a moment, the blood tongue had become a bloody mess and had shrunk by more than 60%. Meow meow, the underworld beast seemed to be in great pain. It screamed wildly, and the brilliance of its whole body was bright again. The blood of the netherworld sea rushed up, as if to erase the lightning on the wound. Zizi, a few drops of blood of the underworld fell on Xiaohua's primordial spirit. Above the primordial spirit, there were also traces of lightning. A few strange ghost heads flashed in the blood and then disappeared. Wisps of wind of the underworld were born roar. Little White Dragon roared again, and its figure rushed into the body of the underworld beast again. The underworld beast seemed to be unable to resist. After the sound of thunder, another bigger hole appeared. At this time, Xiaohua's primordial spirit had completely corroded the blood tongue, and his entire primordial spirit regained its freedom. Meow meow. Meow meow, the underworld beast screamed. The underworld turtle under it immediately changed direction and swam back to the depths of the netherworld. See Xiaohua? Little White Dragon's voice sounded in Xiaohua's primordial spirit, very weak. I'm here. Xiaohua replied in his mind. Okay, let's go back quickly. I can't hold on for long. How did you get to the netherworld sea? How did you encounter the sound mirage beast? If you and my primordial spirit hadn't gone through the 3 gold lightning tribulation before, I'm afraid only death would await us today. As Little White Dragon spoke, it used the dragon claws of its soul to grab Xiaohua's primordial spirit and flew to the shore against the wind of the underworld. In the wind of the underworld, Little White Dragon's soul and Xiaohua's primordial spirit both emitted a faint lightning. Seeing that Xiaohua's body was still flashing with a faint golden light, and that the so-called beautiful music of the sound clam beast was still drifting in the air, Ziming's face was still filled with intoxication, but his feet were no longer moving forward with all their strength. Xiaohua's primordial spirit rushed into the mysterious dark clouds and rushed into the clear spirit heaven. Following a burst of dizziness, Xiaohua's mind returned to his body. Huff, Xiaohua let out a long breath. Just as he was about to turn around, another huge rumbling sound came from above his head. Not good netherworld path. Xiaohua was shocked. Needless to say, the passage opened by the underworld beast must be closing. If he didn't leave now, he would really have to stay here. Thinking of this, Xiaohua didn't say anything else and hastily urged the wind escape technique. His figure suddenly rose. Following the wind of the underworld, he flew towards the crack that the soul warrior had just walked out of. Fortunately, although Ziming wasn't awake, the green light around her body was still there. Although the wind of the underworld was slowly corroding the green light, when Xiaohua arrived at the crack, it didn't completely melt the green light. Moreover, after the battle between the two undead underworld beasts and the attack of the Sound Clam beast, no underworld beast dared to rashly appear in this part of the Netherworld Sea. Xiaohua didn't encounter any danger when crossing this place. Chapter 2900. Io, isn't this Elder Jilan from the Jing Apple Stronghold? Xiaohua had just landed in front of the crack, when he saw another elder with an intoxicated look on his face. Xiaohua pondered for a moment, then picked Ziming up from his back and pulled down her soul nest. He used his soul sense to send Ziming into the soul nest, then placed the soul nest in his bosom. His other hand reached out to grab Elder Jilan's neck, and his figure rushed into the crack, flying towards the collapsed tunnel behind him. Outside the nether path in the plaza, all the palaces were shaking violently. Everyone, including Ji-Man from the Hutu stronghold, turned pale with fright. After a while, the trembling subsided. Ji-Man flew up and released her soul sense to check the source of the trembling. Rumble. Another trembling came. This time, the trembling was very clear. It came from the door behind her. Even the palace door was shaken to the point of collapsing. The palace of the underworld. Ji-Man's heart skipped a beat. Raising her head to look at the night sky, she was getting closer to Ziming. Not good. Without another word, Ji-Man flew towards the door. The other soul warriors followed suit and swarmed into the palace of the underworld. By the time everyone arrived at the palace of the underworld, Ji-Man was already floating in the air. The skeletons that littered the palace of the underworld had already transformed into waves of blood. Waves of violent shockwaves could be felt from the inside, causing the entire palace of the underworld to shake violently. Hurry! Ji-Man was already waving the bone staff in her hand to open the door of the underworld. But when a soul warrior tried to pass through the door of the underworld, Ji-Man realized that the door of the underworld couldn't be passed through. Ji-Man. Something must have happened inside. It must have affected the soul techniques and soul arrays. This door can't be used. An elder hurriedly reported. See, everyone was shocked. Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia, who were the last to arrive, were even more shocked. I just don't know if we can come out from this door. Ji-Man stared at the oval that was filled with green flames, his eyes filled with confusion. Everyone stood there for a long while. The entire Netherworld Hall didn't stop for even a moment. The skeletons that had turned into blood waves were like the Netherworld Sea. Following the tremors, huge waves were set off. Even the Netherworld door was shaking nonstop. Not only were the flames flickering, even the oval door was expanding and shrinking unsteadily, faintly discernible. The gazes of the bystanders followed the flickering of the flame, but Fairy Hongxia's heart was fluctuating along with it. Xiaohua went in hand with Ziming. If the Yellow Springs gate disappeared and Xiaohua couldn't come out, then how could Xiaohua still be alive? Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao's faces were also filled with anxiety. Their gazes were fixed on the gates of the Netherworld, not daring to move in the slightest. Just as everyone was at a loss and feeling extremely anxious, the entire Yellow Spring Palace suddenly calmed down and became silent. Although the pool of blood in the Yellow Spring Palace was still red, it was cut off as it calmed down and no longer had any ripples. Furthermore, the gate of the Yellow Springs was glowing with a brilliant green light. What's going on now? Hutu Stockade's Ji-Man was alarmed. She probably thought that the calm wasn't necessarily a good thing. After the calm, there would definitely be a huge commotion. Following that, Ji-Man issued a series of orders. Hundreds of elders rushed into the sky and landed around the Yellow Spring Palace. Each of them held a bone staff in their hands as they waited for the huge phenomenon to happen. But out of everyone's expectations, as time passed, the pool of blood gradually turned back into skeletons. There was no longer any disturbance. This place was as silent as the wilderness for 100 years. Not even the slightest sound of wind could be heard. Only, everyone gradually understood that all the changes were in the past. All their expectations had fallen into the Netherworld Eye and were buried in the Netherworld Sea. Seeing the green flames of the gate of the yellow springs gradually dim, and the oval circle of light also slowly disappear, Fairy Hongxia's heart was like dead ashes. Midnight had finally arrived. No one could delay time for even a moment. Wang. Suddenly, just when everyone thought that it was unlikely for a miracle to happen, the gate of the yellow springs, which only had an outline left, emitted a faint golden light. Just as the golden light appeared, a tall and thin figure rushed out from the golden light and stood proudly in midair of the Yellow Springs Palace. Phew, seeing the familiar figure, although his face was covered by the golden light, Fairy Hongxia couldn't help but let out a long sigh, and a smile bloomed on her face. As for Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, after a moment of concern, they looked at each other and shook their heads slightly. Xiao Hua was always able to do things that no one dared to imagine. He had also appeared at the last moment to keep everyone in suspense. After the golden light dissipated, Xiao Hua was also in a state of shock. He turned his head and looked at the gate of the Yellow Springs, which only had a 40% outline left. He felt extremely lucky in his heart. Even though it wasn't the last moment to escape, it was still a miracle that Xiao Hua had the ability to recognize directions. Being able to escape from such a complicated and damaged tunnel was truly a miracle. Boom! The entire Acheron Palace exploded. The dozens of elders who were scattered around the Acheron Palace stopped waving their soul weapons. The faint golden light from before wasn't a soul cultivator's soul technique, so how could they not be alarmed? Seeing that it was a human figure, and that the person who came out after the golden light was Xiao Hua, and that Xiao Hua was carrying two people in his hands, he stopped using his soul force. Where's Ziyi? G-Man of the Empress Earth Stronghold was shocked. Xiao Hua's golden light had completely blocked out his soul sense. This was one of the rarest situations G-Man had ever encountered. Moreover, when she clearly saw that the two people Xiao Hua was carrying were not Ziyi, a trace of grief flashed through her eyes as she hurriedly asked. Reporting to G-Man. Xiao Hua looked around and saw the whispering crowd, as well as Fairy Hongxia and the rest from the Netherworld Hall. He lifted the two people in his hands and said solemnly, "This Xiao followed Midnight to the Netherworld to search for the Netherworld Orchid. However, we encountered a Netherworld beast when he spoke until here." Xiao Hua's body swayed and fell from midair. He only stopped when he reached the bottom of the Yellow Spring Hall. When he raised his head again, his face was incomparably pale. "What happened to Ziyi?" G-Man asked sternly. Xiao Hua waved his hand. One of them was Elder Jilan, and the other was a soul warrior whose name he didn't know. The intoxication on their faces had gradually faded away, and their eyes that had been staring into the distance were starting to clear up. Xiao Hua naturally knew that the two were about to wake up, so he tossed them to the two elders closest to him. Then he looked up and replied, "Ziyi, of course he died in the Sea of Nether. Not only him but all the other soul warriors have died as well. The only ones left are me and the two people I met when I was escaping." Ziyi. G-Man was confused. She wasn't sure if what Xiao Hua said was true or not, or if it was what Ziming had planned. Ziyi, his death was far too sudden. This Xiao cough. I couldn't even protect myself in the first place. Truly, Xiao Hua coughed twice before smiling bitterly. This Xiao will be bold enough to ask G-Man for permission to go into closed-door training. Once this Xiao's injuries are healed, I'll be able to report to G-Man what happened. G-Man was anxious. She really wanted to pry open Xiao Hua's mouth. Xiao Hua had said so much, but she didn't want to hear a single word. I'd like G-Man to tell Ziming." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and flew a few steps before looking up again. This Xiao wasn't able to protect Ziyi. I've let Ziming down. Phew, G-Man let out a sigh of relief. The anxiety on her face lessened as she nodded. This old one understands. Go into closed-door training. Ziming is taking care of the sacred beast in the ancestral hall. When tomorrow comes, this old one will send someone to inform her. This Xiao can't hold on any longer. I'll take my leave. Without another word, Xiao Hua turned around and flew away. Fairy Hongxia, Li Zongbao, and Xiao Mao had already flown over. The two of them supported Xiao Hua from left and right, and Xiao Hua immediately collapsed in their hands, Looking at Xiaohua and the other three flying away, G-Man glanced around and shouted, "Everyone, the Yellow Spring Grand Hall is under a strong attack. Use your soul spells to check the stability of the soul formation. Don't let the nether beasts come to Ming Mountains through the crack." Yes, all the elders waved the bone staff in their hands. Streaks of green light were waved in an orderly manner as they began to check and repair the soul array. "Guards," G-Man ordered again. "Other than the necessary patrols, transfer all forces to the surroundings of the Yellow Springs Hall. Check carefully. Do not let any nether beasts escape from the eye of the netherworld." Yes, the group of spirit warriors also began to move. All forces were transferred to the surroundings of the Yellow Springs Hall. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao supported Xiaohua out of the Yellow Springs Hall, and hurriedly flew towards the quiet room from before. There were spirit warriors guarding the hall, but at this moment, they couldn't be bothered to lead the way. Fairy Hongxia originally wanted to find someone to guide them, but Xiaohua hurriedly stopped her. "Nonsense," G-Man transferred all forces to the Yellow Springs Hall. It wasn't without ulterior motives. When Fairy Hongxia heard Xiaohua stop, she naturally came to her senses. She was too worried about Xiaohua, and was overjoyed by Xiaohua's survival. Indeed, she didn't notice the conversation between Xiaohua and G-Man. Seeing a secluded place, Xiaohua released his Buddhist sense and roughly looked around. Then he took out a soul nest from his chest and with a shake of his hand, sent Ziming out. Ziming was the same as Elder Jilan. Previously, his face was filled with intoxication, but now he was much more sober. As soon as he came out of the soul nest, his face was immediately filled with incomparable fear. He hurriedly grabbed Xiaohua's hand and looked around. When he saw that he was in Huta's stronghold, the fear on his face lessened. He opened his mouth to ask Xiaohua. Chapter 2901. Xiaohua would not waste time and hurriedly said, "Ziming, you don't have much time. Moreover, you should be in the ancestral hall of your Huta village. Everything can be left for another day." Ziming suddenly woke up and looked at Fairy Hongxia, who was staring at him coldly. He hurriedly withdrew his hand and nodded. "Thank you, young Master Xiao. I understand." Immediately after, he looked around and waved the bone staff in his hand. His figure floated up like a ghost and flew into the distance. When Ziming's figure completely disappeared, Xiaohua heaved a sigh of relief. "Xiaohua, what happened inside?" It has to be said that Fairy Hongxia's heart was meticulous. Just from Ziming grabbing Xiaohua's hand without hesitation, she immediately saw a lot of things. "Don't mention it." Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, who were still protecting him, and said, "I almost couldn't get out. Damn it, I didn't expect. This netherworld palace really leads to the netherworld sea. I even met the undead underworld beast inside. And there were 3 of them." Undead underworld beast. Hearing this, the 3 of them were shocked. Fairy Hongxia's thoughts of questioning immediately disappeared without a trace. "Xiaohua, are you injured?" Fairy Hongxia hurriedly asked. "Sigh, it's a long story. Senior brother, you should send me back. Looks like I have to go into seclusion for a while." Xiaohua sighed and replied. "Okay." Li Zongbao replied without hesitation. Xiao Mao did not have any objections. Fairy Hongxia had some questions she wanted to ask, but looking at Xiaohua's dispirited state, it was too late to feel sorry for him. How could she blame him for nothing? Thus, Xiaohua went into seclusion in the quiet room for more than 30 days. In fact, the so-called seclusion, Xiaohua's heart was not calm. How could he really go into seclusion? What he was thinking about was the fight between the 2 undead underworld beasts. The fight between the 2 underworld beasts that exceeded Xiaohua's imagination also exceeded his imagination. He would never have dreamed that the undead underworld beasts would fight in such a way. Even the netherworld sea could not corrode the rock wall, but under their tentacles, it was like a rotten rock. It seemed that even a spirit-severing cultivator might not have this kind of ability. Of course, putting aside the environment of the netherworld sea, the spirit-severing stage cultivator might not necessarily be unable to kill the undead underworld beast. However, this kind of undisguised attack, where he did not care about his own injuries, was truly an eye-opener for Xiaohua. In addition, Xiaohua still couldn't make up his mind about that inexplicable warning. He didn't know if it was because of him, or if it was because his golden light had attracted the attention of that ladywere-like underworld beast, or his actions had attracted the attention of that snake-tailed underworld beast. If his golden light caused trouble, Xiaohua would be scratching his ears and scratching his cheeks. Although the golden light of that beetle-like underworld beast was familiar to Xiaohua, and was similar to the golden light flickering around his body, he really couldn't find a reason to get close to that underworld beast. This undead underworld beast couldn't possibly fight to the death with the snake-tailed underworld beast just for him. However, if his vigilance came from that snake-tailed underworld beast, Xiaohua had doubts. Didn't he just not bow down in the square? Then, that underworld beast hated him? It killed dozens of people just to find him. Although he didn't bow down, but what did it have to do with this snake-tailed underworld beast? Could it be that it was for the so-called face? Speaking of face, Xiaohua was even more puzzled. The three kingdoms of cultivation often talked about the face of a nascent soul cultivator. But now that Xiaohua had a nascent soul cultivation base, he never felt that face was worth anything. A face was not even worth a piece of low-grade spirit stone. Therefore, if that Huta Great God's avatar's underworld beast was focused on killing him, there was no reason at all. However, did underworld beasts talk about reasons? Naturally not, so Xiaohua just thought about it and ignored it. Finally, he focused his attention on the changes in the soul strands. Speaking of the changes in the soul strands, Xiaohua didn't notice it at all. However, after he threw away all his doubts and explained them, he suddenly discovered that his primordial spirit dancing in Qingshan heaven seemed to be somewhat different. This difference was very strange and also very inexplicable. At this time, in Qingshan heaven, in addition to the dancing figures of Xiaohua and the little white dragon, there was also a kind of faintly discernible music. That music was very ethereal, faintly discernible. However, this music seemed to resound in the soul, making Xiaohua unable to forget it for the rest of his life. When Xiaohua was looking for the origin of the music, he discovered that this music was actually produced by the soul strands that killed the Sound Clam beast. Even the primordial spirit that was invaded by the blood of the Sound Clam beast was somewhat different. The dancing posture was completely different from before, with more madness and more wisdom. Regarding the previous changes, Xiaohua could still remain indifferent. After all, he was also very knowledgeable. However, regarding the last change, he couldn't help but be shocked. This Xiaohua himself was incoherent. What was the biggest barrier for him to cultivate the soul technique? It was because the soul strands couldn't make sounds, because his throat couldn't make sounds. The sound of the throat was the power of the bloodline. Apart from the bloodline of the 12 great gods like Xiao Mao and Zi Ming, others couldn't make sounds. Although Xiaohua obtained Master Qin Qin's soul strands to make sounds, he had never checked it, because using this sound method would consume life essence. This was something Xiaohua couldn't agree to no matter what. Now, not only could the soul strands make sounds, even his primordial spirit had a great change. Could Xiaohua remain calm? A kind of uncontrollable ecstasy spontaneously arose. This young master can finally use the green seal text. Finally, I can use the soul curse. Xiaohua knew the formidable power of the green seal text, and also knew the strange effect of the soul curse. He could finally try some of the methods of the ancient great gods. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiaohua calmed down. When he carefully checked again, he made a new discovery. The soul strands around Xiaohua's primordial spirit were extremely numerous, almost filling the entire clear spirit heaven. Only a very small portion of these soul strands could make sounds. However, with the passage of time, this proportion gradually increased. Although the increase was still extremely slow, it was still increasing. It was only a matter of time before all the soul strands could make sounds. With the sound of music, the clear spirit heaven was clearly a lot more lively. Even the speed of Xiaohua's primordial spirit's ascension was a lot faster than before. It seems that the cultivation of the 9 heavens of spirit origin is not only about dancing, but also music. The two complemented each other to achieve the best results. Xiaohua gradually understood. After looking at his own situation, Xiaohua looked at Little White Dragon's soul. Following the sound of music, Little White Dragon naturally danced crazily like Xiaohua's primordial spirit. However, Xiaohua could clearly see that Little White Dragon was still a bit dimmer than before. Presumably, Little White Dragon had used a lot of energy to attack the Sound Clam Beast's body. Moreover, Little White Dragon hadn't completely recovered last time, so it didn't let Xiaohua disturb it. Now that it was forcibly pulled out of the mysterious dark clouds by the Sound Clam Beast, it had no choice but to fight the Sound Clam Beast with all its might. However, fortunately, although there was some energy loss, it wasn't fatal. It would slowly recover with quiet cultivation. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't disturb Little White Dragon. His mind withdrew from the clear spirit heaven and took out Master Qinqin's soul nest. He took out the bone that recorded the green seal text sound soul technique. Just as he was about to look at it, his heart stirred. He put the bone aside and took out the root of the netherworld bamboo from his bosom. Looking at this 1-inch tall, fist-sized object that was wrapped in a layer of faint black strands, Xiaohua released his Buddhist sense and carefully looked at it. Then he released his mind and wrapped this object, slowly sending it into the space. His own mind also entered the space. He saw that the netherworld bamboo was very normal outside the space. The black strands came out from one end and entered from the other. However, just as his mind sent it into the space, the instant it touched the space, the netherworld bamboo suddenly disappeared. It disappeared in Xiaohua's mind. Damn it! Why is it so strange? Could it be that the netherworld bamboo and the netherworld lotus were not sent into the space? Could it be that the netherworld objects can't enter the space? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. But then he rejoiced. Fortunately, this young master has the experience of the disappearance of the netherworld lotus. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let Ziming take the netherworld bamboo. I would have given it to him myself. Alas, this trip to the netherworld I was in vain. Then, Xiaohua's mind carefully searched the space again, but he couldn't find the netherworld bamboo. Only then did he come out of the space and began to comprehend the bone. Xiaohua's meditation didn't matter, and several dozen days quickly passed. On this day, Xiaohua's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. Looking at the bone in his hand, he shook his head slightly and sighed. Sure enough, there isn't a single secret art in this world that is easy to comprehend. Even if you comprehend it, it is difficult to use it. Although Master Qinqin's soul technique is not profound, but if you really want to practice it to understand it, it is really difficult. I originally thought that with this soul technique, I would be able to pronounce it. But I didn't expect that I would still need to learn the secret of pronouncing it. But now that I can pronounce it, I realize that the difficult part is still to come. The pronunciation of the green seal script is different from normal speech. Because there are only 365 green seal script characters. When 2 green seal script characters are put together, they become a new syllable. When 3, 4, or even more green seal script characters are put together, they become a new syllable that is even more complicated. I must first learn the most basic green seal script characters. Then I can add them one by one. For example, the green seal script characters of the cloud and rain technique. This green seal script is equivalent to a talisman. If I want to use this talisman, I have to use my soul thread to pronounce all the green seal script characters at the same time. This is also the reason why the cloud and rain talisman has the cloud and rain technique effect. Chapter 2902. However, there's a huge difference between the soul thread being able to speak and the soul thread being able to speak. It's like how a newborn baby can cry, but it's not something that can be done in a short period of time. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's mind suddenly lit up. Yes, the soul silk can speak. Isn't my primordial spirit like a child? Can the primordial spirit speak like a human? Previously, the soul silk was able to speak because it was stained with the mysterious juice of the Sound Clam Beast. Isn't my primordial spirit also stained with that juice? Forget it, forget it. Don't let your imagination run wild. Immediately, Xiaohua smiled bitterly. I'd better practice the soul silk's pronunciation first. When the soul silk can produce the green seal text, then I'll think about the possibility of using the primordial spirit to chant the talisman. Then, Xiaohua's mind entered the clear spirit heaven, and used the secret method in his joints to temper the soul silk to produce the pronunciation. This secret method was indeed useful. When the soul silk swayed, some vague syllables were produced, and at the same time, some faint green light was suddenly produced. Xiaohua knew that if the syllables were clear and correct, this green light should be able to produce the most basic 365 green seal text. Just as Xiaohua was practicing in full swing, his heart suddenly moved. He urged the primordial spirit to continue practicing the pronunciation of the green seal text. But his mind left the mysterious dark cloud. Outside the main hall where Xiaohua was in seclusion, Ziming, who was dressed in plain clothes, was standing at the door with a frown. Behind her, the attendant named Fu Lu was standing beside her with a bitter expression. At this time, Fu Lu was obviously much older, and his figure was somewhat stooped. Beside him were several attendants in the same attire. Some of them had followed Ziming to the Sky Patrol City, and some had not. But their faces were as sad as Fu Lu's. Seeing Ziming hesitating at the door for a moment, and then turning to leave, pacing back and forth a few times before standing at the door hesitantly again, Fu Lu couldn't help but say, "Miss, you might as well knock on the door directly. Young Master Xiao has been in seclusion for so long, I think he should be fine. If you keep delaying like this, I'm afraid it's not a good thing. G-Man of the Jing Apple Village has urged you several times, and G-Man is also a little impatient." "Don't be impatient." Ziming simply didn't listen to Fu Lu finish speaking. He raised his hand and stopped Fu Lu from continuing. He replied indifferently, "When young Master Xiao came out of the Netherworld Eye, he was already heavily injured. Also, didn't you hear from Elder Jilan? There were actually 2 Netherworld beasts fighting in the Netherworld Sea. Young Master Xiao must have been affected. If he doesn't come out now, he must be at a critical juncture of healing. How can I disturb him? As for G-Man's side, I think I should go and beg him again." With a creaking sound, the tightly shut door of the palace opened in front of Ziming's eyes. "Young Master Xiao." Ziming was overjoyed and hurriedly looked up. When he saw Xiaohua's smiling eyes and his usual expression, the big stone that had been hanging in his heart finally fell. However, she still asked, How are your injuries?" Xiaohua walked out of the palace door and met everyone's gaze. He was originally smiling, but after seeing Fu Lu, his heart was slightly stunned. Because whether it was Fu Lu or the other guards beside him, their eyes didn't have the kind of joy that Ziming had. There was more vigilance and hatred. Immediately, Xiaohua understood, and a trace of helplessness emerged in his heart. But when he heard Ziming's question, saw Ziming's joy, and saw a small flower beside Ziming's black hair, his face became sad again, and he said in a low voice, This Xiao is fine. It's just that this Xiao is useless, unable to protect Ziyi in the Netherworld Eye, and let Ziyi fall into the mouth of the Netherworld Beast. Even his corpse can't be left behind. I'm really unworthy of Miss Ziming's great trust." Hearing Xiaohua mention Ziyi, the joy on Ziming's face also hurriedly disappeared. She nodded very sadly and said, "Alas, life and death are predestined. Wealth and honor are in heaven. Perhaps this is Ziyi's fate. This concubine believes that since you were able to save Jilan and Emo Han from the Netherworld Eye, if you had even half a chance of saving Ziyi, you would have done it long ago." "Indeed." Xiaohua nodded slightly. "The situation that day was very sudden, young Master Xiao. The situation that day, Elder Jilan and Emo Han have already reported to Ji-Man." Hearing Xiaohua mention the situation that day, Ziming hurriedly said, "This concubine knows that it was indeed dangerous. However, what appeared later, according to Ji-Man's guess, should be the extremely rare sound clam beast of the Netherworld Sea. This sound clam beast's Netherworld sound is extremely powerful. All people or Netherworld beasts that hear the sound clam beast's Netherworld sound will lose themselves, and their bodies will not be under their control. They will only move according to the sound clam beast's arrangements. Elder Ji-Lan heard the Netherworld sound when she was escaping and immediately lost her memory. She does not know anything that happened after that. At this time, Ji-Man has already roughly known everything that happened in the Netherworld Eye. She just does not know how Ziyi returned to the embrace of Huta Great God, and also does not know how young Master Xiao escaped from the Sound Clam Beast's netherworld sound. Therefore, I ask young Master Xiao to think carefully and follow this concubine to report to Huta Palace. And this Xiao understands. Xiao Hua understood Ziming's meaning and nodded. This Xiao's injuries are now very good, and I have already come out of seclusion. Naturally, I will report to Ji Man. This old servant greets young Master Xiao. At this time Fu Lu, who had been standing by, finally came forward to pay his respects. However, his posture was very forced, and his tone was also cold. Where was the respectful appearance? Fu Lu. Xiao Hua was very apologetic and cupped his hands in return. This Xiao is very sorry, no need to say these things. Fu Lu stood up and said coldly, Miss has already said that life and death are determined by fate. My family's young master saw young Master Xiao in Sky Patrol City that day, and immediately treated young Master Xiao as a celestial being, and tried his best to befriend him. Unfortunately, he did not expect that he was just planting a seed of disaster for himself. Fu Lu, Ziming's face was awkward, and she hurriedly scolded Fu Lu. Didn't young Master Xiao say that he has already done his best? If it was not for the fact that things were too sudden, he would definitely want to save Ziyi. Young Master Xiao can even save a Mohan. Why can't he save Ziyi? Miss Ziming, Xiao Hua hurriedly said with a smile. It's all right, Fu Lu is a loyal servant, and is loyal to Ziyi. This Xiao will not care about his words. Loyal servant or not, this old man does not care. A trace of excitement appeared on Fu Lu's face. This old man only knows that young Master Zai treats you with sincerity. When we were in Sky Patrol City, he gave you everything he had. You don't know the importance of those things at all. He has bet his life on you. He really wants to treat you as his only close friend in this life. Young Master Ziyi's pain. Others may not know, but how can this old man not know? As he said that, Fu Lu even glanced at Ziming. Ziming's face was extremely embarrassed, and there was even a trace of red. This old man does not dare to say these words, but if this old man does not say it now, when can I say it? Young Master Zi, he has already returned to the embrace of Huta Great God, and there will no longer be a trace of him in Huta Stronghold. Perhaps people will still remember Ziyi these days, but what about 10 years later? Within 100 years? This old man is afraid that I will not be able to live past 10 years. By that time, who will still know that Ziyi once lived in Huta Stronghold? Ziming bit her lips, wanting to stop him, but Xiao Hua shook his head slightly, indicating that she should not say anything. Fu Lu also went all out, and said, This old man will not speak of young Master Ziyi's pain. He will not tell this old man, nor will he tell anyone else. He can only bury it in his heart. Ever since he returned from Sky Patrol City, young Master Ziyi would mention young Master Xiao from time to time. He was very envious of young Master Xiao's carefreeness, calmness and magnanimity. He once said that if he could cultivate like young Master Xiao and stand proudly on Donrain continent with young Master Xiao, his life would not be in vain. This old man knows that he may not be doing this because of young Master Xiao's magnanimity, but because he wants to unload the burden on his shoulders and avoid some inevitable suspicion. He did not expect that young Master Xiao would return to Huda Stronghold, and even this old servant absolutely did not expect that. Young Master Ziyi must be wild with joy. However, young Master did not expect that meeting young Master Xiao was not only not his greatest joy, but also his greatest misfortune. Young Master was serving the sacred beast in the ancestral hall, and could still live an ignoble life, but meeting young Master Xiao, even if he could not live, he could not. Ziming did not know whether to laugh or cry. Previously in the Netherworld path, she had said some of her inner thoughts. After all, it was pitch black, so it was not considered embarrassing. But now, in front of so many people, although Xiao Hua did not speak, there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he must have thought of the words from before, and the matter from before. Ziming's face gradually became hot. Fu Lu, actually, Ziyi may not be like what you said. Young Master Xiao. Ziming bit her lips and said softly, Young Miss, although you and young Master Ziyi are twin siblings, you are not Ziyi after all. How do you know what Ziyi is thinking? Fu Lu's neck stiffened, and he retorted. Young Miss spent more time with Ziyi in the beginning. But later on, for the soul-falling lamp, you were always running around outside, so how could you spend more time with Ziyi? This old servant has always served young master, so of course, I know more about Ziyi's thoughts than young Miss. Besides, if not for young Master Zhao's arrival, if not for young Master Zhao's matter, why would young Master Ziyi accompany him into the netherworld? The two young masters were clearly met by young Miss Ziming. And it was also young Miss Ziming who accompanied them to Huta Stronghold. But why was it young Master Ziyi who entered the netherworld? If not for his previous acquaintance with young Master Xiao, why would young master risk his life? Sometimes, this old servant would struggle in his heart. This young Master Xiao, did he really meet young Master Ziyi in Sky Patrol City? Otherwise, why would young Master Xiao be able to rescue Emohan and Jilan, but not young Master Zai who was right beside him? Fu Lu's face was flushed red as he spoke. Clearly, he was extremely agitated. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.